above average away from that east coast.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next big winner on the road in this brand new Alnag Baron 560 motorhome, courtesy of Marquis Leisure. Imagine the fun you could have in this luxurious home from home worth over £67,000. We'll also give you £5,000 in tax-free cash to make your next getaway a great one. And it could be all yours. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you on this glorious afternoon. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you, as ever, live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Labour are set to spend hundreds of millions of pounds in seats where they fear electoral wipeout from Nigel Farage's Reform Party across working-class Britain. Now, with the money to be spent on playgrounds and ASBO officers, will it have any impact whatsoever? Are Labour running scared of reform? I'll be joined by a Labour MP who hopes it does work, and also by Reform's Lee Anderson. And my guest, June Mummery, has this message for the Prime Minister.
Rumour has it, sir, that you might be handing over our waters to the EU. Why?
We'll find out why soon with June Mummery, because on Monday, Keir Starmer will reset the UK's relations with the European Union at what critics are calling a surrender summit in London. Brussels is demanding 4 years of extra access to British fishing waters as one of their so-called red lines. Will our fishermen once again get battered? And as well as fishing, is Gibraltar's status as a sovereign British territory on the rocks? Well, Spain's Foreign Minister Jose Manuel Alvarez has his sights set on full EU membership for the ROC. Well, today I'll be joined by a Gibraltar diplomat who says, no way, Jose. Gibraltar is 100% British. And the BBC's Gary Lineker is facing calls to be sacked once again after this time sharing a video on social media by a pro-Palestine group that depicted a well-known anti-Semitic rat slur. Just how many chances is this fella going to get? That's all coming up in your next hour. Well, it's a pleasure to have your company. We've got some live pictures for you now, direct from Qatar. There is Donald Trump at a signing ceremony, hot off the heels of that $142 billion deal yesterday in Saudi Arabia, this 4-day whistle-stop tour of the Middle East. Trade, tariffs, defence, massive deals, now makes its way to the next territory, and the United Arab Emirates will be next. Huge deals, huge issues for global security. Later in the show, I'll be asking, will all of this spell curtains for the Islamist jihadist movement across the world? Yesterday, Donald Trump effectively declaring war on Iran's capability to have nuclear arms. We'll have full details of that throughout the show. Now, also on today's show, I'll be detailing another bombshell poll for the Reform Party, once again putting them on 30 points. And further analysis shows us that Ed Miliband could lose his seat if a general election were held tomorrow. All of that coming on an action-packed show. Get in touch the usual way, gbnews.com/your say. But now let's have your headlines with that man. It's Mark White.
Good afternoon. At 3:03, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. And as we've just seen there, the President of the United States is now in Qatar, just hours after an historic but highly controversial meeting with Syria's new leader. Well, that meeting with Ahmed al-Shara took place this morning in Saudi Arabia and comes just a day after the US decision to lift sanctions on Damascus. Al-Shara, a former al-Qaeda commander, led rebels in overthrowing regime of Bashar al-Assad in December. He remains a designated terrorist in the US. Well, in Doha, Mr. Trump will have a series of meetings where military cooperation and regional security are expected to top the agenda in a part of the Gulf where Washington has its largest military base in the region.
We are currently exploring normalizing relations with Syria's new government, as you know, beginning with my meeting with President Ahmed al-Shara and Secretary Rubio's meeting with the Syrian foreign minister. I am also ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria to give them a fresh start. It gives them a chance for greatness. The sanctions were really crippling, very powerful. And I spoke to Mohammed, and I spoke to our friend from Turkey, who we just spoke to also by phone now. But felt very strongly that this would give them a chance. It's not going to be easy anyway, so it gives them a good, strong chance.
To UK politics, and the Prime Minister has claimed the Conservative Party is sliding into oblivion and is a dead party walking. Sir Keir Starmer was responding to Tory leader Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's questions as the pair clashed over Labour's employment rights bill and trade deals. Ms Badenoch criticised the Prime Minister's recent deal with Donald Trump, branding it a tiny tariff deal with the US, which she said hindered the UK economy.
The former trade minister must be the only former trade minister who's against all trade deals which boost our economy. She says she's against the India deal, even though it's got the same provisions she put on the table. She's against the US deal, even though it saves thousands of jobs in car manufacturing. And Mr. Speaker, most absurdly, she says she's going to rip up the EU deal when she hasn't even seen what's on the page.
I'm very happy to welcome his tiny tariff deal, but the fact is, it has put us in a worse position than we were in March. He should not over-egg the pudding.
No criminal charges will be brought against former Reform MP Rupert Lowe after claims he made verbal threats towards the party's chairman. The Great Yarmouth MP was suspended from Nigel Farage's party in March amid a deepening civil war and allegations about his conduct, which he denies. Mr Lowe, who now sits in the Commons as an independent, said it was a sinister attempt to weaponise the criminal justice system against him, putting not just his political future, but his liberty at risk. The Justice Secretary will set out plans to address prison overcrowding this afternoon, amid suggestions criminals could be released after serving just a third of their sentence. Shabana Mahmood's proposals come as the latest weekly prison population in England and Wales hits 88,087. This is just 434 below the last peak in the prison population before the government began freeing thousands of prisoners early in an effort to curb overcrowding. Burberry has announced it could cut around 1,700 roles worldwide over the next 2 years as part of plans to reduce costs. Britain's biggest luxury fashion brand made a pre-tax loss of £66 million for the 12 months to the end of March, compared with £383 million profit in the previous year after a slump in sales around the world. Burberry shares jumped as much as 9.9% following the jobs cut announcement. And that's it. You're right up to date with the headlines now. You've all been waiting for it. The housewife's favourite. He's also a good favourite with the houseboys as well, let's face it. Here's Martin Daubney.
Mark, what have you been drinking? Anyway, let's hear now from Donald Trump speaking in Qatar.
Both tall, handsome guys that happen to be very smart, but he's also a very special guy, and it's good to see all the relationships forming in the Middle East, because the Middle East is really being talked about all over the world, and we're having a lot to do with it. We're helping a lot, but they're doing a tremendous job. So I just want to thank everybody very much for being here. I want to thank the media. The media has been very fair, actually, and it's a great honor to be with you. This is, you take a look at this room. This room is the real deal. That's called white marble. It's very hard to buy. Believe me, I know very well, because you try to buy it, you can't buy it. And you just take a look at what you have here. It's been incredible what you've been able to build as a nation. And we're with you all the way, and you know that.
That's Donald Trump there in Qatar on that 4-day whistle-stop tour of the Gulf states. Billions of dollars worth of deals in defence, in security, in tariffs. American companies winning huge contracts. We'll carry back more of that as it happens throughout the rest of the show. But back to Britain now, and the Labour government is set to spend millions of pounds on communities in reform-leaning regions, and the funding will be used to regenerate some of the UK's poorest areas, several of which were won by Nigel Farage's upstart party in the recent local elections. And Sir Keir Starmer's MPs warn that the party faces electoral wipeout without more crucial investment. Well, this is a fruitful topic to debate, and to do that, I'm joined in the studio by Reform UK MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, the Labour MP for North Durham, Luke Akehurst, and GBNews senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Let's start with you first, if we could, Luke. There's no window dressing the fact that the Labour Party had a terrible day at the local elections. A lot of people criticising Keir Starmer, saying sounds like it's leaning towards Nigel Farage on immigration. Meanwhile, the Runcorn by-election seemed to be a pretty grim bellwether for the direction of travel. Now some action is being taken. Hundreds of millions of pounds being put towards seats, 600 areas we understand. Tell us the plan and tell us, do you think it'll work?
First of all, I don't want to count chickens until they've hatched, because actually there's a comprehensive spending review, and this is just one newspaper story that hints that one of the things that might be in that spending review is regeneration money, basically, for the most deprived neighbourhoods. There's an independent commission on neighbourhoods that's identified 613 of the most deprived neighbourhoods. We're talking quite small areas. One of them's in my constituency, and that those are mission-critical neighbourhoods, because the things that the government wants to sort out in terms of health outcomes, education outcomes, crime and higher economic activity,
but it's fair
the stats
to say,
are lowest in those places, so it makes sense if you're a Labour government to target them.
But there's no coincidence, Mr Akehurst, that 85% of these areas are areas where reform recently won. It's a mission-critical neighbourhood, not just because it's mission-critical in terms of helping the communities, but mission-critical in terms of the Labour Party surviving.
I think it's the other way round. It's that because people in those communities are so frustrated that they've had decades of under economic investment and haven't seen things change, they're very frustrated about the pace of change, and so they turn to reform really to shout and say, come on, when are we going to get to see the things that we've always wanted?
And it's a fair point. Jo Platt, who lost the seat in Runcorn, she said visible decline is pushing people towards alternatives like reform. And by the way, the same thing happened with the Boris way, with Boris Johnson in Brexit. People went from Labour to Conservative for the first time, and then we had that thing called levelling up. Before that, we had the Northern Powerhouse. Millions of pounds were thrown at the Red Wall to keep them to be Conservative. It didn't work then.
Well,
why do you think it'll work now?
Nothing was put into my constituency, and people are very conscious of that they didn't get anything from levelling up. And you can go to Stanley, which is one of the two main towns, and people are very depressed by the fact that I think it was the Daily Telegraph said it was the sixth ugliest high street in Britain, and they're like, why isn't government of any type sorting that out fast enough? And that's a huge priority for me. So if it does turn out there's money in the spending review for regenerating towns like that, I will be absolutely delighted. And I think it's in line with Labour values. That's what Labour governments are for, isn't it? Trying to put more economic activity and more public spending into the communities that need it most.
And I think it's absolutely fair to say that any MP would appreciate more money for their constituency. That's the point, to deliver on your promise as an elected representative. But some of the things being touted in the paper today, pardon my French, they don't particularly sound like vote winners en masse. Repairing playgrounds, that's important.
Yeah.
Hiring wardens for antisocial behaviour, that's also important.
So you've picked up on...
enough?
So first off, this isn't going to be like game-changing amounts of money. It's going to be a useful amount of money, but when it's spread around 613 places, it's not going to suddenly transform people's lives. But the choice of what to spend it on, my understanding, that'll be made by committees of local residents. So if they think that wardens to deal with antisocial behaviour is the top priority, then that's what they'll be able to spend it on. It won't be central government saying you have to spend it on these particular things, as long as it feeds into tackling the targets in the government's mission. So the things about raising educational attainment, people's health getting better, more people having jobs, less crime.
Okay. Lee Anderson, let's bring you in now. As former Conservative Party, now Reform, you live in these areas, you're brought up in these areas, you've seen levelling up come and go. Do you think this will work? And do you think the Labour Party are running scared?
Well, I agree with Luke in that we welcome this sort of money into these deprived areas. And it's funny that, look at some of the deprived areas in the Midlands, in the north, northwest, northeast. That I've seen their high streets fail, they've seen the pubs close, the businesses close, deprivation, and all that comes with it. But what have they all got in common, Martin? Over the past 50, 60, 70 years, they've always had a Labour MP and they've always had Labour-run councils, and that's the problem. It's a massive problem. And it was a problem in Ashfield until they had the good sense to elect me in 2019 and then re-elect me with a bigger vote share just last year. But look, we had probably over £100 million of the levelling up pot in Ashfield. Did it do the Tories any good? No. They went from 20,000 votes down to 2,500, 3,000 votes. I think it is. What people want to see is money invested in the area that makes a real difference, something that you see every day. And that, for me, is the highways, it's the potholes, it's the roads. We've got some of the worst roads in Europe now, and if we're going to dole some money out in these communities, fix our roads, that would be my priority. But presumably, Mr Akehurst, that's precisely the kind of thing that local committees that in Labour areas might choose to spend money on.
So the government has already put a huge amount into a fund for potholes, and I agree that that's a priority. Actually, I think these things are important because they affect how people view the neighbourhood that they live in. But the bigger amounts of money in the spending review that are going to be really interesting are the amounts on infrastructure. And whether the mayors in areas with combined mayoral authorities manage to put in really good bids for new infrastructure, new roads, new rail networks, etc., that those really would be game-changing in terms of bringing in business and enabling people to access jobs.
OK. Can I turn now to another story we're covering today? And there's a new poll come out. This one is by Freshwater Strategies. I think we've got a map we can put up of the potential electoral landscape of Britain. To talk you through it quickly, Reform are leading. We see there once again 10 percentage points ahead now on 32. That's their second highest ever. Plus for Labour is flat on 22. The Conservatives nosediving on 19, losing 8. Liberal Democrats 15, putting 1 on. Lee Anderson, this poll is backing up what we call momentum. It's also painting a terrible picture for the Conservatives. They're simply in freefall. And it also, off the back, the timing of this is crucial. Keir Starmer had done those trade deals with America. He'd done those trade deals with India. Doesn't seem to have resonated.
It doesn't resonate, Martin. People aren't taking any notice of the Labour Party or the Conservative Party at the moment. Let's be clear, the Conservative Party, I think, in my opinion, are toast. They're finished now. And if I was allowed to, I'd show you some of the messages on my phone from Tory councillors, ex-Tory MPs who are wanting to make the move, and I'm saying, well, you just join if you want to. There's no deals to be struck that people want to come over and be promised things.
Any big names you might recognise?
Well, there's a few in there, but I can't divulge the information stored within my phone. But yeah, they're rattled. The rats are leaving the sinking ship, pretty sharpish. But what we want is what we saw just 2 weeks ago. We want real people from the real world, real communities like Ashfield to step up and say, we've had enough of this nonsense, we've had enough of the Labour Party, we've had enough of the Conservative Party, we're going to step up and put our name on that ballot paper. And they did in huge numbers, Martin. We had the most amount of candidates out of all the parties, and guess what? We got 10 councils, 677 councillors, 2 mayorals and a new MP.
Let's bring in Nigel Nelson for a comment here. The media have called it the Nige Mayor. There's a Nige Mayor for both parties.
That's a Nige Mayor.
Actually, we have 2 Nige Mayors. On a serious point, both of the main political parties getting caught in a pincer movement here. Votes hemorrhaging away to the Liberal Democrats from the Conservatives and to Reform, and Labour leaking to Reform as well. We talk about the sugar rush after the local elections. Is this a blip? It's starting to look like it might be something more consecutive. It could be a trend.
Well, I mean, certainly it's a trend because, I mean, Reform have either been first or second in polls for the last couple of months. So things are certainly moving. But the caution here is that we're a long way from a general election. So everything can change from that. If you were taking these particular polls, you're talking about a Reform government with a majority of more than 100. If they worked out, as I say, this was the day after the election, we would have the Lib Dems would be the official opposition, Labour in 3rd place, and the SNP beating the Tories and the Tories being in 5th place. So that would be a completely changed political map of Britain. But I caution, as I said, that the election's a long way away.
Luke Akehurst, when you see polls like that and a second analysis of the council elections, Ed Miliband losing his seat to the Reform Party, of the 81 Westminster seats there in that map voted last Thursday, only 3 of them would return a Labour MP. Are a lot of people out there, perhaps yourself included, may I ask, feeling like I could be the next Runcorn? You know, we've got a serious Nige Mayor.
Well, I don't need an opinion poll to tell me that, because I was at the count watching the votes that had been cast by people that happily voted for me in the general election, and then quite large numbers of them switched over to Reform.
What are they telling you? Why are they doing that?
So on the doorstep, 4 things came through. Concern that we weren't moving fast enough to tackle immigration, cost of living, linked to cost of living, people hit by the winter fuel allowance cut if they were just above the threshold, and then the state of the local economy, the things that we've already been talking about. But we've got 3 or 4 years to actually deliver change for people. If we can't bring change to those communities, make them better places to live, make people better off, then we won't deserve to get re-elected. But I think, we've got a government with a lot of energy and some good ideas, and actually over that time that we're going to change people's lives, and they'll be in a different viewpoint on us once we actually get round to the next general election.
Leanne, final word. Do you think, I mean, it's a long time to go. No, the reform could implode, the Labour Party could resurge. 4 years are long years in politics. Look what happened to Boris Johnson's majority, of which you were a part of. Or do you think the writing is on the wall? Are people so fed up of the two main parties, they just want change?
Yeah, well, the difference with Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party, which I was a part of, they were in government, so they're always going to get criticised whilst they're in government. We're not in government. We're the official opposition now. We're making all the noise in Parliament. If you pick the papers up every single day, Martin, it's Reform UK that's on the front of the papers, holding this useless, weak, spineless government to account on a daily basis. Our membership is going through the roof. There's more and more people wanting to be candidates. You saw the recent elections. It's only going one way, Martin, and we are pushing at an open door to number 10 Downing Street.
OK, gentlemen, thanks for your time. Luke Akehurst, especially, thank you for coming in today, MP for Labour for North Durham. Lee Anderson, Ashfield, and, of course, Nigel Nelson, our second Nige Mayor. Thank you very much. Now, coming up, could Gibraltar's status as a sovereign British territory be on the rocks? More on this next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain. We like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christys Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christys Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:25 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, could the government be set to hand over more of our overseas territory? Well, this time Gibraltar could enter the Schengen zone, according to the ROC's First Minister. Entering the passport-free area and keeping its border with Spain open could mean British citizens travelling to Gibraltar may have to show their passports to Spanish or European Union border guards, or perhaps even Spanish coppers. Well, we can now speak with the Chief Minister of Gibraltar, Fabian Picardo. Mr. Picardo, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have your company. Here we go again. It's Groundhog Day. It seems every time there's some kind of European Union reset talk, they've got their hands on your rocks. They want Gibraltar back. What do you say to that?
No one has their hand on our rock. No one will get their hands on our rock. Let's be very clear about one thing. That issue has not been put on the table by Spain. It's not been put on the table by the European Union. It would be completely misleading to suggest that the sovereignty of Gibraltar, or any aspect of the sovereignty of Gibraltar, or control in respect of Gibraltar, is in any way being put on the table by any of the parties negotiating the new arrangements between the United Kingdom and the European Union for Gibraltar to have a relationship with the European Union, which is at our doorstep because, as you know, Gibraltar is the only part of the United Kingdom that is part of continental Europe.
Now, 2002, by a margin of 98.99%, Gibraltarians voted to remain British. Sovereign British Gibraltarians voted 98.99%. Is it still the same now? And if so, why is the EU and why is Spain continually poking their noses in?
Well, Spain and the EU are not poking their noses in. I think to describe it like that is just entirely factually incorrect. The fact is that
as I understand it, Jose Manuel Alvarez wants Spanish police on your island checking passports.
Hi, Martin. Sorry, I think I was talking over you, were talking over me. Jose Manuel Alvarez does not want to do anything on our island because we're not an island. We're a peninsula. We're linked to Europe by land. That is a frontier with Spain. And the negotiation that we have ongoing has got absolutely nothing to do with sovereignty. It's got to do with a trade deal on the fluidity, not free movement, the fluidity of goods and the fluidity, not free movement, of people across the frontier in the north-south direction, which is the entry point into the Schengen area and into the rest of the European Union. And your question, which was whether people in Gibraltar still felt strongly that we needed a relationship with the European Union, the answer to that question is a definite yes, because otherwise we would become, in effect, a geographic island, which in 2.5 square miles by 1 mile is not an easy thing economically to deal with.
OK, superb stuff. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's a pleasure to have your company as the Chief Minister of Gibraltar, Fabian Picardo. Let's get back to the studio for some reaction with Nigel Nelson. You seem to be quite happy with the situation as it is, but a lot of people aren't. For example, Robert Jenrick is today saying that this does sound like Gibraltar is on the table for part of a reset. It always is. They've spoken like a true diplomat there, Mr. Picardo, but the fact of the matter is a lot of people are concerned. Now, after we saw the Chagos Islands, now potentially Gibraltar, what next? The Falklands?
No, I mean, I think the comparison here should be with the Falklands. As long as the Falkland Islanders and the Gibraltarians want to stay British, they stay British. So there is no question that Gibraltar's sovereignty will be on the table. What Fabian Picardo was talking about is an awful lot of Spanish workers cross the border to work in Gibraltar. Some Gibraltarians go across the border to work in Spain. It's trying to make those crossings much simpler, which it was when we were in the EU. Life in Gibraltar was easier before Brexit, but there's still, when it comes down to the European reset that Keir Starmer is talking about, nothing will affect the sovereignty of Gibraltar at the end of it.
But once again, the Project Fear version of Brexit told us, it would take hours to get into Gibraltar, get out. It doesn't. It's continued on exactly as it was before, because the fact of the matter is most custom guards don't bother to check passports because it's the same workers moving the same day. There's been no problem since Brexit.
No, I mean, I think that's right. And you're absolutely right. The Project Fear did raise something that wasn't going to happen. So it is still difficult in the sense that you actually have the checks in the first place. Obviously, before Brexit, you just wandered backwards and forwards, and there wasn't any problem. Now people will sort it out for themselves because, as you say, the various border officers will recognise most of the workers going backwards and forwards anyway. So they do work it out amongst themselves. That's why I think that the threat by the Spanish foreign minister was a bit of an idle one. The Spanish always do this when a negotiation comes up because they want Gibraltar back.
OK, just before we move on, just to let you know, very shortly, the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, will set out plans to address prison overcrowding amid suggestions that criminals could be released after serving just 1/3 of their sentences. It was a half. Then it was 40%. Now it's 33% of their sentences. We're waiting on that statement, that address. We'll cross that live when it happens. Let's come back to the studio. Nigel Nelson, on that precise topic, we've got a serious problem with prison overcrowding. The Labour Party just seem to think, well, the answer is just let criminals out, even violent ones.
Well, no, I mean, I think that the problem is, you're right, it's a serious problem. How do you address it? So at the moment, that when they first released criminals, that they made sure that sex offenders weren't released.
But that didn't happen.
Well,
some sex offenders got out.
There were a couple of accidents rather than, but that wasn't designed. They were trying to stop those people getting out. I mean, I think we're heading for a debate about what prison is for, and it would be much easier if we got rid of short sentences, 6 months.
OK, in fact, let's cross now to Shabana Mahmood.
Our prisons. When I took office nearly a year ago, I inherited prisons on the brink of collapse. Despite the immediate measures that we took to avert disaster, this crisis has not gone away. David Gauke will soon publish his sentencing review. It will set out how we end this cycle of crisis once and for all. But today, I will talk about the situation that we face now and further measures that we must take to stabilise the prison population. To do so, I would first like to turn to Amy Rees. Until recently, Amy was Chief Executive of His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, having started out 24 years ago as a prison officer on the wings. Now, the department's interim permanent secretary, Amy will set out the scale of the challenge that we face today.
Thank you, Lord Chancellor. The total prison population is 88,087, and the adult male estate is operating at approximately 99% of its capacity. Every year, on our current trajectory, the prison population rises by 3,000. And now, we expect to hit zero capacity to entirely run out of prison places for adult men in November of this year. The population has been rising rapidly for many years. In 1993, the population was less than half of its current level, at around 40,000 prisoners. When I first joined the service in 2001, it was 65,000. In recent years, it has accelerated rapidly to its current levels and is forecast to be more than 100,000 by 2029. The primary cause of this is clear. Sentence lengths have increased considerably. In 2005, the average custodial sentence was 13 months. By 2023, it was 21 months, a 66% increase. We now have a larger population of sentenced prisoners in our prisons serving longer sentences than they used to. While this is the primary cause, it's not the only cause. The number of offenders brought back to prison after being released, known as recall, is a significant, though lesser, contributing factor. In 1993, the recall population was virtually non-existent at around 100 prisoners. By 2018, it was 6,000. And since then, levels have soared, more than doubling to 13,600 in March this year. Until now, successive governments have attempted to manage prison capacity primarily by carrying out early releases. In late 2023, the prison system was running at around 99% of its capacity. Faced with the prospect of running out of prison places altogether, the End of Custody Supervised Licence Scheme was introduced in October 2023. This meant eligible prisoners were automatically released up to 18 days before their scheduled release date. Later, this increased to 35 days and then up to 70 days in May 2024. This measure prevented prisons from running out of places entirely, but it only bought the service time. By July last year, prisons were again operating close to maximum capacity. Ministers announced plans for some prisoners serving standard determinant sentences to be released automatically at the 40% point of their sentence, rather than 50%. A surge of these releases took place over 2 tranches in the autumn and again prevented prisons from filling up entirely. In parallel, we have brought in other smaller scale measures to manage capacity. This includes moving some risk-assessed offenders out of prison and on to home detention, tagged and curfewed for a longer period. These measures are important, but they do not address the scale of the challenge we face. As I have said, the prison population is rising by around 3,000 a year, the equivalent of 2 large prisons every single year. Even with these measures in place, we will run out of prison places in just 5 months' time. The operational reality of running prisons so close to their maximum capacity is that it creates a set of interconnected and escalating problems. Even before you run out entirely, our prisons become more dangerous places. With limited space, it becomes harder to manage prisons, and the challenges of violence and drugs grow. This makes prisons less safe, and it leaves staff with less time to get prisoners to work and education, vital to ensuring that they leave prison less likely to reoffend. We are already reliant on a small number of police cells in some parts of the country where we hold offenders temporarily. If capacity gets even tighter, as an exceptional measure, we would activate Operation Early Dawn. This means we convene a team at 5:30 a.m. every day to track each individual potentially coming into custody so that we can make sure there will be an available space for them. Early Dawn was activated between the 19th of August to the 9th of September last year, prior to the implementation of early releases. It was also previously activated in October 2023, March 2024, and May 2024. In recent weeks, we have come close to activating Early Dawn once again. If Operation Early Dawn is unable to manage the flow of prisoners, the situation becomes intolerable. We would, at this stage, see the managed breakdown of the criminal justice system. Police holding cells would be full, and the police would be faced with being unable to make arrests. Courts would need to consider bail for offenders they would normally consider dangerous enough to remand to prison. If the system reaches that point, there would be a clear risk to public safety, and the only solution would be rapid emergency releases. This would mean offenders being let out of prison without time for probation officers and other services to put in place the release plans needed to protect the public. And even this would only buy us time. The prison population will keep rising. Without a longer-term plan, sooner or later, we would run out of places once more. That is the situation in the prison service as it stands today. And I'm now going to hand back to the Lord Chancellor to talk about the path forward from here.
Let me start with a conclusion that Amy cannot say, but I will. It is shameful that this country in 2025 finds itself in this cycle of crisis. It is shameful that for so long the last Conservative government failed to reckon with the reality of a rising prison population. When Labour was last in government, we increased prison capacity by 28,000 places. In their 14 years in power, the Conservatives added just 500 additional places, leaving our prisons on the brink of collapse. This government will end the cycle of crisis. We will bring order and control back to our prisons. And that starts by building more of them. Last December, we published a long-term building strategy setting out our aim to open up 14,000 prison places by 2031. This is the largest expansion of the prison estate since the Victorians, and we are not wasting time. We've already committed £2.3 billion to prison expansion, and since taking office, we have delivered 2,400 new places, and we will now go further. While the spending review is ongoing, I can announce today that the Treasury will fund our prison expansion plans in full across the spending review period. This is a total capital investment of £4.7 billion. It allows us to start building 3 new prisons, including breaking ground on a site near HMP Gartree later this year. This investment will also fund new cells at existing prisons, with new house blocks and rapid deployment cells opened across the country. This is a record prison expansion. And after the long delays under the last government, who allowed their backbenchers to block every project, we are building at breakneck pace. But we must be honest in a way that my predecessors never were. Prison building is necessary, but it is not sufficient. We cannot build our way out of this crisis. Despite record prison building, the population is simply rising too fast. By spring 2028, even with the funding that I have announced today, we will be 9,500 places short. The conclusion is clear. We have to do things differently. In October, I appointed David Gauke to lead an independent review of sentencing. He has been ably supported by a panel that draws together expertise from across the criminal justice system. Now, I cannot and will not get ahead of their recommendations, but let me be clear about the task that they have been set. The sentencing review must ensure there is always space in prison for dangerous offenders. To achieve this, the panel will have to recommend a reduction in the length of some custodial sentences and an expansion of prison outside of prison for those offenders who can be managed in the community. At the same time, I have set David a clear condition. We must protect the public in whatever measures we pursue. Too often today, our prisons do the opposite. They create better criminals and not better citizens, with 80% of offenders now re-offenders. Across the world, there are models that we can learn from. And David and I both visited Texas earlier this year. There, offenders who comply with a strict regime earn an earlier release, while those who behave badly are locked up for longer. Crime there is now at a 50-year low, reoffending is down, and the prison population is under control. Meanwhile, technology, both existing and emerging, clearly has the potential to transform community punishment. A study published last week shows our radio frequency tagging is cutting reoffending by around 20%. And emerging technology presents us with further opportunities. We are entering a world where tech has the potential to impose a digital prison outside a prison, surveilling offenders even more closely than they can be watched in jail. To make our streets safer, we must seize on these opportunities. While the sentencing review offers us our path to ending the capacity crisis in our prisons for good, it will take time to take effect. The impact of sentencing reforms will not be felt before spring next year. On our current trajectory, hitting zero capacity in November, we simply do not have that time. Now, there will be no return to the releases we saw late last year, but I have always been clear that if further measures are required, I am willing to take them. So today, I am announcing a measure that will target the recall population, which has more than doubled in 7 years. We will bring legislation in the coming weeks that means those serving sentences of between 1 and 4 years can only be returned to prison for a fixed 28-day period. Some offenders will be excluded from this measure, including any offender who has been recalled for committing a serious further offence. We also will exclude those who are subject to higher levels of risk management by multiple agencies, where the police, prisons and probation services work together. This measure builds on previous legislation introduced by the last government, who mandated 14-day recalls for those serving sentences of under 1 year. And crucially, it buys us the time we need to introduce the sentencing reforms that, alongside our record prison building plans, will end the crisis in our prisons for good. The consequences of failing to act are unthinkable, but they must be understood. If our prisons overflow, courts cancel trials, police halt their arrest, crimes goes unpunished, and we reach a total breakdown of law and order. I was confronted by that prospect when I took office. I am confronted by it again now, but I will never let it happen. This problem was years in the making. It was obvious to each of my predecessors, but they all failed to act. I believe this was unconscionable. It was the final disgrace of the last Conservative government. And however hard it might be, I will not repeat their mistakes. This government is building new prisons, more than any other in the modern era. But we are also facing into the fact that after 14 years of inaction, we cannot just build our way out of this crisis. This government will do whatever it takes to ensure that we never run out of prison places again. Thank you very much. Now let's take some questions, folks. Let's go to Seema.
Hello, hi, Seema from the BBC. Can you just explain how many people will be released as a result of these measures that you're facing? Can you put a number on it? And second, if that's okay, what would you say to a victim whose perpetrator was recalled for breaching their restraining order, for example, and they said that this spoof, they've labelled it as outrageous, and have said that some criminals would be given an easy way out without the scrutiny of a parole board, because our understanding is that the parole board part of the assessment would be taken out?
Under the fixed-term recall measures that I'm announcing today, we believe they will create around 1,400 prison places. We believe that that number will allow us to get from November into spring of next year. As you'll have seen on the slides earlier, we are on track to hit zero capacity within our prison estate by November, and this measure will tide us over until any changes from the sentencing review start to hit the system. And look, I understand the concerns of victims groups and others. The very worst thing that could happen is that we hit zero in November. And as Amy and I have both described, at that point you see the breakdown of law and order in this country. If we hit zero in November, then police cannot make arrests, courts can't hold trials, and the whole system then collapses. So we cannot allow that to happen, and it is my job to make sure that that does not happen. Sophie.
Hi. So, do you think it will be a personal failure of yours if prisons are still facing a capacity crisis at the end of the Parliament?
What I've promised is we are never going to be in this position again. I walked into the department last year facing the complete collapse of our prison system, and we have been dealing with that crisis every single day ever since. And I've already made lots of decisions designed to buy us time until we can bridge to a longer-term solution, which is why I asked David Gauke to do his independent review into sentencing. I am determined that this government makes the changes. We are doing record prison building of a kind that we have never seen in the modern era. So we are building, and we're going to deal with the demand so that we never run out of prison places in this country again. I'll do the other Sophie now because I think I failed to distinguish between the two. So sorry about that. Yes, there are two Sophies.
So last week we spent a day filming at Preston Prison, one of the most overcrowded in the country. We went back this week to do a live programme from there. And honestly, it was pretty clear to me that the system is not working. But the problem is the public seem to want prisoners locked up for longer, according to the polling. And we know that this is the number 10 that is pretty sensitive to public polling, that has a history of buckling after a few tweets from Nigel Farage or from Robert Jenrick. So I guess my question to you is, are you prepared to be unpopular?
The thing I'm prepared to do is to make sure we never, ever run out of prison places again. At the moment, as things stand today, by November, we go down to zero. Going down to zero was this prospect that faced me when I came into office, where I knew within days and weeks we would hit zero again. That's why I say it is the unconscionable that the last government left us in this position. And
are you prepared to be unpopular?
I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to keep this country safe, to make sure that we never run out of prison places and that we never see the collapse of either the prison system or our wider law and order system in this country, and that we never put that at risk ever again. Let's go over there. Matt.
Matt Dathan from The Times. You talked about a future situation where you'd have a digital prison. It's easier to monitor people in prison. Is that really punishment if they're sitting at home watching Netflix?
Well, look, we're very clear, and this is something that I've asked the Independent Sentencing Review to look at, which is how to make sure that we have good community punishment that the public can have confidence in, that ensures that the punishment element of a sentence is retained, but that also helps us rehabilitate offenders so that they turn into better citizens rather than the better criminals that unfortunately we are producing far too many of today. And the innovation that we are seeing in technology will ultimately enable us to go further. I think that whether you are seeing people on tags or within prison, it is a curtailment of liberty. And curtailment of liberty is one way in which our society tells offenders that this is how they are punished when they break the laws and the rules that all of us live by. So we're not sacrificing any of those principles. But of course, in expanding the range of community punishment, we will want to make sure that that is a new system that the public can have confidence in as well. Let's come to Charles.
On the people who will be entitled to the 28-day fixed recall, will it include people who are on domestic abuse offences? And what if someone goes out, commits another offence, goes back in, then commits another offence? So in other words, you have a prolific offender, and so will they just end up bouncing back out and back in? How do you deal with that?
So the exclusions will exclude serious further offences. So if somebody who is currently on licence commits a serious further offence, they will be excluded from the 28-day fixed term recall. They will be on what is known as the standard recall, so they will go back in for longer. And we will also exclude those offenders who are under multi-agency review and assessment as well. So that does cover those sex offenders, violent offenders. That will include those who are serious domestic abusers as well, who are already in the purview of multiple agencies, the police, local authorities, prison service, probation and others. They will be excluded from this measure as well. Let's do Carl.
Thank you. Carl Dinnan from ITV News. Probation officers who will be looking after these people out in the community say they're already so stretched they can't do their jobs properly. Are you creating a risk that in order to make prisons more safe, you're going to make towns and communities less safe?
Well, I've already announced that we are increasing the number of staff that we have in our probation service. When I came into office, we said we would recruit a further 1,000, which is a number that we hit. We exceeded it, in fact, by 57. And for this year, coming year, we will onboard a further 1,300 probation trainees as well. So we are increasing the number of people within our probation service. We are also already trialling technology designed to improve productivity, so to automate some parts of the jobs that the probation officers currently do on file preparation and so on, freeing them up to do the bit that only they can do, where they bring the human touch and they deal with the offender in front of them and help really think about how we get that person to turn their back on a life of crime. So we're already pivoting the probation service into a position where it can handle some of the asks that we are making of them, and our probation officers do a fantastic job day in, day out. I'll say more about what we're doing with the probation service in the coming weeks and months as well. Let's go to Dave.
Thank you, Lord Chancellor. When you announced the early release scheme last year, you went on to tell the House of Commons that you would publish figures on the numbers of prisoners released. 8 months on, you still haven't done that. Don't the public deserve to know how many people you've let out before you start extending further concessions to other types of prisoner?
Well, we have actually just done the release data just a little earlier in April, so I've already fulfilled that commitment on publishing the data. And of course, when we did the emergency release programme last year, for both of those tranches that came out, we also released that data as well in ad hoc publications, which is the thing that I committed to do in the House of Commons. And our April data release does contain the figures around SDS 40 and indeed all of the other data that we regularly publish on prisons. Let's go to Julia.
Julia from The Sun. During SDS 40, there was a huge issue with tags not being ready and people being released from prison and not being tagged for weeks. You know, in some cases it was months. When you talk about a digital prison outside of prison, what promise can you make to victims that their perpetrators are actually going to be tagged, when in the past we've seen that's not been the case?
Well, the first thing I would say is the tech works. We are very confident that whether they're radio frequency tags, GPS tags, or alcohol monitoring tags, sobriety tags, which a few of you have trialled out for us, they all work. The tech is strong, it works, it does the job. There have been issues with the performance of our contractor, Serco, on the administration of the tags. And that was something that we saw last year. That performance has improved. Myself and the Prisons Minister have been monitoring that directly and working closely with Serco, and the performance is now in a much better position, and the backlog that was there at the tail end of last year has now been cleared. So we will carry on monitoring the performance of that contract very, very closely and take any measures that we need to make sure that the performance is up to scratch. But the tech itself, that really does work. And we know from the study that we published just last week that a radio frequency tag, people wearing that, we cut reoffending by 20%. So the tech is there and it works. Let's see, Rajiv.
Do you need to get legislation related to the sensitivity review onto the statute books by the autumn? If you don't, is there a chance that you may have to order another early release scheme? And if I may, as a West Midlands MP, you'll be well aware of the impact and consequences of being up Pales Rivers of Blood speech. Are you happy to repeat the Prime Minister's phrase that immigration curbs, that without immigration curbs, the UK risks becoming an island of strangers?
Well, just on your first question, Rajiv, the David Gauke's independent sentencing review will be published in the next few weeks. We will respond, and then we will take forward the measures that we want to pursue, and of course we will need to legislate. We will legislate at pace, and as I described earlier, currently we're on track to come down to zero capacity in November of this year. That's why I've announced the measures on on fixed-term recall today, we would anticipate that any changes from a sentencing bill could start having an impact on the system from April of next year. So that's the timeline that we are working to. We're moving very, very quickly, but it's because we want to make sure we never have to do emergency releases again, and that we can get the system into sustainability as quickly as possible and make sure we never run out of prison places again. And then on your second question, look, I agree with the Prime Minister that without curbs on migration, without making sure that we have strong rules that everyone follows and that we have a pace of immigration that allows for integration into our country, we do risk becoming a nation of people estranged from one another. And what he has described is something that I absolutely believe in, and which are the values of the Labour Party, which is a desire to see this country as a nation of neighbours. But we can't just passively think that that's going to happen. That's an active choice as to the sort of country you want to be. And we cannot turn the other way whilst people in our country, citizens, are becoming estranged with one another over the issue of immigration. We have a duty, if we want to be a nation of neighbours, exactly as the Prime Minister has described, that we take active steps to make sure that that is what happens. And I absolutely support the Prime Minister in that.
You're happy to repeat the phrase that he uses, which is that the immigration curbs, without immigration curbs, the UK risks becoming an island of strangers.
Yes, it is a risk that we are running. Without immigration curbs, it is self-evidently true that people in our country will become more estranged from one another. And if we want to build a nation of neighbours, we have to take active steps to make sure that that is what happens. And that matters to me deeply personally as well, as someone who's the child of immigrants. We cannot take for granted the fact that in this incredible, democratic, pluralistic country like ours, we have a very tolerant, decent, fair-minded nation. That's something you have to work at. You can't just bank it and hope it never changes. It's an active process. And what the Prime Minister was describing and the policies that he and our government are pursuing is designed to make sure that we never, ever put the best of our nation at risk. Let's do Jane from Channel 4.
Thank you. If people that the system decides need to go back into prison spend less time on recall, do you accept that increases the risk to the public?
Look, I think the thing that brings the most risk to the public is if we go down to 0 places in our prison system by November of this year, which is what we are currently on track to do. And I am simply not willing to take that risk. We have described today the things that will mean for everybody in our country, where police cannot make arrests and courts cannot hold trials. And as Amy described, we start to see the breakdown of the law and order system in our country. We're not willing to take that risk. We cannot hit 0 places in our prison estate in November. That is the legacy of the last Conservative government, and it is why we are the government that is making the decisions on record prison building and the independent sentencing review to make sure we're never in this position again. I'm not willing to take the risk of running out of prison places. And then final question to Anahita from PA.
Hi. Thank you, Chancellor. Just to ask, the Plan Secretary previously said that the early release scheme is likely to create capacity until autumn 2025. So now you're looking at changes for recall. If these measures don't work, what else are you looking at doing so that we don't hit 0 by November 2025?
Well, these measures will create around 1,400 prison places. We've already made changes to home detention curfew, which I announced in Parliament a few months ago. They will start to have an impact later this summer. The combination of these changes, we believe, can take us to spring of next year. I won't pretend it's not difficult looking at those prison numbers as they fluctuate day by day, week by week. It's why I'm so angry at the legacy of the last Conservative government for putting us and the country, in fact, most important is what they've done to the country, that they've left us in this position where the prison system has been in this state of crisis and on the verge of collapse for so long, and it's why we're determined to put that right. Thank you very much, folks. That's all we've got time for. Thank you.
OK, and that was the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood talking about the prison crisis, backed up by Amy Rees, the Permanent Secretary, the most senior civil servant in the area. I want to start off by saying I just thought the journalists in that room didn't ask the question that everybody watching this programme and millions of people across the country want to be answered. 10,000 foreign criminals in British prisons right now, which many of whom we believe should be deported. 1,300 Albanians, 1,000 Polish prisoners, 10,000 in total. Nobody talked about why should they be in British prisons at British taxpayers' expense for years and years and years. Instead, the answer is to build more prisons. But here's the problem. It's going to take until 2031 to get 14,000 more spaces. I mean, you could get rid of 10,000 spaces at the drop of a hat. If we had a serious government that was serious about protecting the British public, serious about saving money, and serious about reducing the prison population. This government might not even be in power in 2031. It's a long-term solution. Shabana Mahmood, of course, blamed the Conservatives. 14 years of failure to address it. The prison population was 88,000 in 1993. But then it doubled. And just talking about it would take all of these years to build extra prisons, adding extra blocks to existing prisons, as well as 3 new prisons. But that, dear readers and viewers and listeners, is going to cost the budget £4.7 billion. £4.7 billion. We were told there's no money left for pensioners. Suddenly, £4.7 billion left for prisons. Now, we can all agree we should build more prisons, but it's going to take a long time. Nigel Nelson, am I being unreasonable when I say, why did none of those journalists there? I think they soft-soaped the Justice Secretary. Nobody asked the question that people want to be answered, and that is, get these foreign prisoners deported. There shouldn't be a single Albanian in a prison in Britain. We've got a returns deal. We've got to deal with them. That's the point of international diplomacy. Nobody talks about that today.
Yeah. First of all, that question should have been asked. I absolutely agree with you. It's 10,400 foreign prisoners in British jails. The problem area is that we have a system whereby if they commit a crime in this country, they have to serve half their sentence in this country before they're liable for deportation. Now, when it comes down...
That could be changed.
It can. And
the Justice Secretary could change that. The government could change that.
Well, it may well be, because David Gauke, a former Justice Secretary, is doing a review into prisons. It was something that the current Justice Secretary just mentioned, and she is not going to second-guess what he might recommend, but he's looking at sentencing, so it may be they can change that and change that sentencing thing. Then we've got the foreign transfer scheme, which is where we can transfer foreign prisoners to a country that agrees to take them, where they serve the rest of the sentence there. We've got the deal with 110 countries. Unfortunately, we lost the automatic right to do that with the EU when Brexit happened.
Don't blame Brexit. We've got a direct deal with Albania. We've got a returns deal with Albania.
But Albania's not in the EU, so...
but most prisoners of foreign origin in British prisons are Albanian, over 1,200 of them. And yet we have a system where we're tied in knots by human rights laws and we can't deport because of bloody chicken nuggets.
Well, I think we're
pardon my French.
We're in all sorts of areas here. The chicken nuggets was not part of a prisoner transfer deal. That was about somebody leaving, whether they should leave the country.
Yeah, but we can't deport because of these ridiculous rules. And meanwhile, the answer is to spend £4.7 billion of British taxpayers' money on more jails to get a capacity of 14,000 when 10,000 could be got rid of at the drop of a hat. That's my question.
And we could get rid of 32,000 out of Britain's jails now if we stopped having sentences of below 6 months.
But why would we do that?
Well, the reason we do that is because they're useless. There is no point sending someone to jail for a short period of time. Jail should primarily be for the protection of the public and for really serious crime, violent crime, sex crimes, those kind of things. It shouldn't be for minor crime. Minor crime should be treated in a completely different way. That is what David Gauke is likely to recommend in his review, because that is what he said before he started the review.
Well, a lot of people watching that press conference will just think, look, I'm going to say it. I think there was a dereliction of duty by the journalists in that room. Sorry, I think there was. I know that GB News were there. They were trying to get a question asked. We weren't allowed to ask. We weren't given a question. But I just think they soft-soaped her. I don't think they asked the right questions. And I think people are sick and tired of early releases that impact their communities. We've seen early releases of sex offenders, of rapists, despite being told that would never happen. It did.
Yeah,
you can blame admin errors. It happened.
It was an error.
Destroys people's lives.
I agree, I agree with
enough.
you. It shouldn't have happened, and it was an error. And I think one of the points they made there about emergency releases is the danger of things like that happening. You can't get any probation in place in time. You can't get them tagged properly. So that was one of the things that the Permanent Secretary just mentioned there. So, yes, I mean, those were errors that were made. But, I mean, the important thing is, for the long term, we've got to find a way of making sure our prisons don't overflow.
And which they are. Imminently. We were told by November, zero capacity by November, and yet we're told in the same press conference we won't see any tangible difference until next spring, which probably means a year's time, which means more early releases, which means billions of pounds of taxpayers' money being spent on prisons that might be completed after the Labour government aren't even in power. I'm sorry, I don't think it's good enough. I think many people watching the show will probably agree. Nigel Nelson, thank you very much. Let's move on. Now, Britain faces an immediate and violent sterling crisis if Nigel Farage takes power and follows through on plans to slash taxes, economists have warned. Simon French, the head of research at PMQs, pronounced that correctly, said proposals by Reform to take millions of workers out of income tax, cuts corporation tax and reduce NHS waiting list to zero would trigger a run on the pound. Well, I'm joined now by the man who made this claim, the chief economist and the head of research at PMQs. That's Simon French. Simon, welcome to the studio. So the article out today says there could be an £80 billion black hole if Reform were to get into power. Tell us how you worked out your numbers.
Sure. So what sits currently on the Reform website, and it's still there as I walked into the studio, was what looks like a manifesto. It is, to all intents and purposes, a manifesto from the 2024 election, and lays out about £150 billion worth of savings. And the line items, there's about 10 different line items. The two biggest ones there were £50 billion of reduction of spending on the public sector, including benefits and pensions, and £35 billion through the savings of quantitative tapering. If you take those two items, and I have some experience in this because I worked on this agenda for 4 years when I was in government under the coalition, trying to cut the cost of government. £50 billion a year, unless you're going to start taking lots of money off lots of pensioners and lots of the sick and disabled, is...
Like the Labour Party have just done.
Correct. And the Reform MPs voted against a package that would have taken £1.5 billion off. This is proposing something of the order of £10 billion. So it's not credible unless you're going to say, actually, welfare and pensions are a big part of this. The other big line item, quantitative tapering, that is the amount that the Treasury has to give back to the Bank of England for the losses they're making on their bond buying programme, or now their bond selling programme. 35 billion was a number back in 2024, but because the bank is now selling assets back into the market, most economists, and I'm not alone in this regard, probably think the savings are closer to between £5 and £10 billion. Put those two big line items together, sum up with other scepticism over other parts of the equation, you get to an £80 billion black hole. And just to put that into context, that's about 4 times what Rachel Reeves claimed after the 2024 election. It's about twice what Liz Truss introduced to the market back in 2022. And on both those occasions, particularly in 2022, sterling did crash. So I don't think it's a particularly controversial conclusion.
The Labour Party has spent about £80 billion since they got into power on pay rises for unions, on carbon capture, various things abroad, on foreign aid. So that's the same numbers the Labour Party just spent. Sterling hasn't tanked now. The economy hasn't been crashed. Some people might say this is mere Project Fear. We heard this during Brexit. The world's going to end if we left the European Union. It didn't happen. And a lot of people today are saying this feels like Project Fear Farage edition.
Well, look, I have no political allegiances. I quite like being able to criticise all. And if you check the record, I've been very, very critical of the current Chancellor, her decisions to raise national insurance on employers, critical of her narrative after the July election. It's very critical of the previous government and some of their economic decisions. I have no dog in the fight here, but equally, I actually positioned this note as there are 4 years before the next general election for reform to revisit this and provide the confidence. I don't want to see, I have 2 daughters in this country, I want to see them growing up in a prosperous UK. I don't want to see people who are now, it's perhaps they're a victim of their own success, leading the last 9 opinion polls, coming forward with plans which financial markets, which will do the same arithmetic as I will, take a pretty dim view of.
OK, Simon, bear with us for a moment if you could, because we've got a line of breaking news just coming to us now. And it's this. Gary Lineker has apologised unreservedly for an Instagram story about Zionism, which featured a picture of a rat, saying, I take full responsibility for this mistake, and that image does not reflect my views. Just to repeat that breaking news line, Gary Lineker has apologised unreservedly for an Instagram story about Zionism, which featured a picture of a rat, saying, I take full responsibility for this mistake. That image does not reflect my views. Now, there have been huge calls for Gary Lineker to be sacked over this post. Perhaps the apology reflects that. We'll discuss this later in the show with some former BBC employees. But let's get back now to the topic we were on previously, and that's will reform tank the economy? Simon French, as you said, you worked in the coalition government. You have huge experience of advising governments. If you were to advise, Richard Tice, by the way, has called your analysis as juvenile claptrap.
I like the juvenile bit. It's been a while since I've been called young. Look, Richard Tice, in his counter to my piece, did say that the reform wouldn't deliver the tax cuts until they'd realised the savings. By the way, that is a very grown-up approach. That is exactly what the markets would want to hear. My challenge back to Richard is it's not what it says on the document on your website, which says critical reforms delivered in the first 100 days. So how am I supposed to interpret that? I'm taking a public document, I'm saying, right, they're suggesting these tax cuts come in the first 100 days. That's clearly how they're leading the electorate. And then he's saying, as a counter to my analysis, actually, no, that isn't what we think. I'm happy, very happy to debate this with Richard, very happy to correct the record, by the way, if he says, actually, the sequencing is we'll not release the goodies in terms of spending and tax cuts until we've released the savings. But that isn't the public document the Reform are campaigning on.
You've just given me an idea, Simon French. Let's get Richard Tice on.
Absolutely.
Maybe the two of you can go tat-tat-tat, and we can sort this out mano a mano. Thanks for coming in today. Really appreciate your time. Simon French, the Chief Economist and Head of Research at Panmure Liberum. Thank you very, very much. Now, we've got some more breaking news for you now, just coming into us in the last few moments, and it's that a prison officer has had their throat slashed with an improvised weapon at HMP Woodhill. And this comes just moments after we were hearing from the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, on Labour's plans for prison expansion and, indeed, early releases. Charlie Peters joins us now. Charlie, this is a very concerning story. Tell us more.
Yes, Martin, and it comes as there have been 3 separate extreme violence incidents against prison officers in the last 24 hours. We're being told by the Prison Officers Association that the incident you're just referring to there, a officer had their throat slashed by an improvised weapon at HMP Woodhill, which is in Milton Keynes, a Category B prison. And we're also being told that in a separate incident at the same jail, another officer was attacked by a man who's been detained under the Terrorism Act of 2008. We're also being told that at Guardtree Prison in Market Harborough, a female officer sustained a broken arm and another officer had a TV thrown at them after an inmate pretended to have an epileptic seizure and then attacked prison officers after they attended to the scene. The GB News also understands that there was a serious assault at HMP Huel on Friday, which is near Redditch in Worcestershire, where an officer was headbutted. We've been told by sources that an officer had his face split open, had his spray taken off him, which was then used against guards who attended to the incident. And Martin, this comes after a further string of violent incidents against prison officers in the last few weeks. Let's not forget that Hashim Abedi, the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber Salman Abedi, attacked 3 officers at a prison in the northeast of Reading. 3 guards were injured there with hot oil. Also, convicted murderer John Mansfield was killed last month at HMP Whitemoor in Cambridgeshire, and Axel Ruder Cabana, the Southport massacre murderer, also attacking a prison officer at HMP Belmarsh in South London. And Martin, we're just hearing some reaction now from the Prison Officers Association against this string of incidents, coming, as you say, as Shabina Mahmood made that intervention. This is Steve Gillen, the General Secretary, saying that escalating levels of violence are out of control in the prison service. He says that it appears that the prison service have learnt nothing. They continue to ignore the calls from our members on the front line for urgent action. Now, all of these incidents of violence from the last 24 hours have come as the prison service is conducting a snap review into the use of protective body armour. But, Martin, that's 3 separate incidents in the last 24 hours, at least 4 officers injured from that, and an additional incident, we're being told, of a head being split open on Friday at another prison. Martin, these prisons, the violence, it's chaos.
Charlie Peters, grimly prophetic that just moments ago at that press conference, the statement that I wrote down here, packed prisons are dangerous prisons. It's felt for a long time, Charlie Peters, they are accidents waiting to happen, and here we are, Charlie Peters. Thanks for bringing us up to speed as ever. Thank you. Now, coming up next, Brussels is demanding 4 extra years of access to British fishing waters as a red line as part of the Prime Minister's European Union reset meeting. A lot of people calling that a surrender summit. That takes part on Monday in London, and will our fishermen once again get battered? I'll be joined next by June Mummery. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain, we like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:24 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now let's cross now to Downing Street and speak with GB News' reporter Adam Cherry, who was in that briefing there on the state of our prison systems with Shabana Mahmood. Adam Cherry, I just lamented the fact that a journalist such as yourself wasn't allowed to ask a proper question, and that is, what about deporting 10,000 foreign criminals? I thought she got a very easy ride by the journalists. You were in the room. Tell us more.
Yeah, you're right, Martin. It's a shame we didn't get to ask that question, but nonetheless, we heard from the Justice Secretary outlining really the terrible situation our prison system is in. And by November this year, on the current trajectory, there'll be no space left for adult males in the prison system, and it risks completely collapsing the law and order system in this country. Just unbelievable to see the figures and see where we're heading here. Of course, look, there's no way that we can build enough prisons immediately, and that's at least what the Justice Secretary was saying. Therefore, we're going to have to release people early who, under normal circumstances, should not be released. Now, this is all ahead of the sentencing review coming from David Gauke next week, and we expect that in that review it will recommend that sentences are reduced for thousands of offenders. The interesting thing about that, and one thing I would have liked to ask the Justice Secretary as well, is that she was very, very critical of previous Justice Secretaries from the Conservative government and said it was shameful, it was their failure. OK, but the person you've just commissioned to write that sentencing review happens to be a former Conservative Justice Secretary, so can we really trust his sentencing review at all? Why have you appointed this man? But nonetheless, we didn't get to ask those questions. I'm sure GB News viewers will have very strong views on all of that, Martin.
Yeah, it was really, really quite an eye-popping revelation, admission. An admission of total failure. Successive governments, fine. No one really cares anymore. They care about the here, they care about the now, and they're being told, prime yourself for more early releases. They're being told it's going to cost an extra 4.7 billion quid to build these NICs, which, by the way, won't even be ready till 2031. Successive governments seem to have been totally asleep at the wheel. Now, thank you very much, Adam Cherry. Always a pleasure. Now, moving on, the Prime Minister is reportedly preparing to cave in to the European Union and agree a deal which guarantees European fishing boats continued and increased access to British waters for 4 extra years. Now, in a significant concession ahead of the UK-EU summit, Sir Keir Starmer hopes the compromise will break the deadlock with Brussels as he tries to secure his much-vaunted Brexit reset. Lord Frost, the former Brexit negotiator, has described the move as a shameful surrender of fishing communities' rights. And I'm joined now by the former Brexit Party MEP and fishing campaigner June Mummery. June, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. June, you put down a video at the weekend in no uncertain terms, speaking your mind to the Prime Minister. Tell us your thoughts.
I'm absolutely disgusted. And as for David Frost pointing that out, well, wasn't he, along with Boris Johnson, didn't he sell us out 5 years ago? I mean, let's get things in perspective here. The Tories are to blame initially. You know, we voted to leave the EU, take back full control of our waters and the rich, lucrative resource, to rebuild deprived coastal communities. And they really are deprived, Martin. You know, you only have to go around the coastal towns to just see how bad things are, because their natural industry has been taken away, been stolen from them. So, you know, let's get that straight. The Tories started this, and now Labour have come in, and they are just going to continue with this same codswallop, in my opinion, and that is what it is. How can we be an independent coastal state when we don't even control our own waters? What leader of a country would do that to its people? I mean, we've got an ocean full of fish, full of a rich resource, whether it is fishing, wind energy or aggregates, any of that. Shouldn't we be harvesting these rich resources? I just don't understand it. Why is fishing always brought in? It obviously proves one thing. It is a great resource to have, and it is worth lots and lots of money to the EU. But for some reason, our government, couldn't care less. You know, coastal folk, they're just this sorry people. We're the kings and queens. Suck it up, buttercups on the coast. We don't care about coastal communities. And the only party that does is Reform UK. We are and have been fighting for this industry since 2016 and prior to that.
Now, June, a lot of people watching this would say, in fact, Kemi Badenoch was commenting last night on GBNews. She sat down with Chris Hope saying the Labour Party and perhaps some in the Conservative Party don't seem to understand fishing. It's only 1% of GDP. Why do Brexiteers, why do people like yourself get so impassioned about it? It's only 1% of the gross domestic product.
Well, it's only worth GDP of 1% because we've given it away. 80% of the fish the EU catches comes from our waters. I mean, you only got to look at Iceland. When they kicked us out, within 2 weeks, we were buying fish from them because we had thousands and thousands of jobs on the Humber that needed raw material to continue. And the same thing with us. You know, and it's a food resource. So what are we going to do? And looking back at the industries, what industry will coastal folk have? Because it's just not fishing. That is GDP is only net to plate. From plate onwards, there's another 7 series of employment of various different things, from even building ships. It was just a massive thing for our island nation. But, you know, we don't take it seriously because they don't care, Martin. They don't care.
And June, what's incredible about this is that if fishing is such a small part of GDP, if it's so inconsequential, why do the French and the Spanish care so much about British fish?
Exactly right. I mean, fishing is, and not just that, it's a wonderful, simple industry. And if we had taken back control when we left the EU, I would predict by now it would be thriving. Thousands and thousands of jobs would be created. You know, I'm fed up with wind energy brings all these jobs. No, they don't. That's another lot of codswallop, in my opinion. There's a few jobs with the boats that go out to sea, but they're all the majority of wind farms are all foreign owned as well. So they bring their own people in that come over here from various different countries. We're weak. Starmer's weak. Boris Johnson was weak, and until we get a government that cares about the whole country, including the 186 seats that sit in coastal communities, we've had it. We really have had it. Just look at how many coastal seats was lost in that general election. And I can tell you this, Martin, if our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, sells us out, I will terrorise him. And I will never let those we have got 3-4 good MPs in coastal seats that are fighting. But apart from that, you know, we hope the others actually get out from under the table and say to him, we can't do it. Because those Labour coastal seats will be toast.
OK, we have to leave it there. June Mummery, shooting straight from the hip. As ever, thank you very much for coming on GB News today. It's always a pleasure. Now, at GB News, we love to hear what you think every day. We're running our poll of the day, and today we've been asking, do you trust the government to protect Britain's fishing industry in talks with the European Union? And the final results will be announced later on in this show. I think we can guess how June Mummery might be voting. Now, for all of our latest polls, news and how to vote, go to gbnews.com/your poll. But now, here's your headlines, and it's Mark White.
Good afternoon at 4:33. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. And we begin with breaking news. A prison officer has been attacked and had their throat slashed at a prison in Buckinghamshire. The incident was one of 2 attacks on officers at Wood Hill Prison in just 24 hours. In the other incident, a prison officer was allegedly assaulted by a terrorist prisoner. A Prison Officers Association spokesman has also told GB News of a further 2 attacks on officers at Gartree Prison and HMP Hewell. Well, the attacks come as the Justice Secretary has set out plans to address prison overcrowding, branding the previous government's management of the prison system as shameful. Shabana Mahmood confirmed £4.7 billion of investment would be used to build 3 new prisons and provide new cells at existing prisons. But she said further changes were needed to the system for recalling offenders back to jail for bad behaviour. The government plans to introduce more limited and fixed recall periods for those serving sentences of less than 3 years. Her proposals come as the latest weekly prison population in England and Wales hits 88,087, 99% of capacity.
It is shameful that this country in 2025 finds itself in this cycle of crisis.
The US president has now arrived in Qatar just hours after an historic but highly controversial meeting with Syria's new leader. That meeting with Ahmed al-Shara took place this morning in Saudi Arabia and comes just a day after the US decided to lift sanctions on Damascus. Al-Shara, a former al-Qaeda commander, led rebels in overthrowing the regime of Bashar al-Assad in December. He remains a designated terrorist in the US. Well, in Doha, Mr. Trump is having a series of meetings where military cooperation and regional security are expected to top the agenda in a part of the Gulf where the US has its largest military base in the region. The Prime Minister has claimed the Conservative Party is sliding into oblivion and is a dead party walking. Sir Keir Starmer was responding to Tory leader Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's questions as the pair clashed over Labour's employment rights bill and trade deals. Ms Badenoch criticised the Prime Minister's recent deal with Donald Trump, branding it a tiny tariff deal with the US, which she said hindered the UK economy.
The former Trade Minister must be the only former Trade Minister who's against all trade deals which boost our economy. She says she's against the India deal, even though it's got the same provisions she put on the table. She's against the US deal, even though it saves thousands of jobs in car manufacturing. And Mr. Speaker, most absurdly, she says she's going to rip up the EU deal when she hasn't even seen what's on the page.
I'm very happy to welcome his tiny tariff deal, but the fact is, it has put us in a worse position than we were in March. He should not over-egg the pudding.
And those tiny tariffs bring us to the end of the latest headlines. More with Martin Daubney after the break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The dry and sunny weather will continue, and for most of us that goes through the weekend as well. Quite cool on North Sea coast, and it will be quite cloudy here as well at times. This area of high pressure is bringing the fine weather, but it's sitting to the north, which means the winds will be coming in from the North Sea, introducing more cloud here as we go through the night and responsible for that cool feel as well. The North Sea is pretty chilly at the moment. Elsewhere, though, it stays dry and fine. We've seen some heavy showers in the southwest through the afternoon. They will tend to drift away. So for most, it's a dry night, long clear spells in the west, and it will be a colder night, certainly across central and western Scotland, rural spots likely to dip down to freezing. So a chilly start, yes, but plenty of sunshine in the west. A grey start over central and eastern England, but that cloud should be breaking up and disappearing as we go through the day. But certainly to begin with, the southeast, East Anglia looking pretty glum. A spectacular start with spring sunshine for Wales, Northern Ireland and indeed most of Scotland. Notice this breeze is still coming down from the north, though, so that will peg the temperatures back. Anywhere exposed to the North Sea and that breeze coming in from the sea, temperatures are going to struggle because the sea is so chilly. It will continue to feed in some low cloud as well, that breeze along some coasts. The cloud inland should melt away, but it may take a while actually. It may not be until the afternoon before the sun finally pops out, but for most places it is another blue sky day and feeling pleasant in that sunshine. Temperatures maybe not as high as today, but still above average for most, high teens, low 20s across southern and western parts, but chilly on those North Sea coasts where any mist and low cloud could just drift back inland pretty pretty quickly during Thursday evening. That'll continue to be a feature of the weather through the weekend, so some eastern areas will be a bit cloudy, particularly in the mornings, but lots of sunshine to come and temperatures mostly above average away from that east coast.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Southbound motorists on the A92 should approach the Bankhead roundabout cautiously due to a broken down vehicle affecting lanes 1 and 2. Bridge maintenance on the M48 eastbound has closed the section between Junction 2, Newhouse and Junction 1, Ost, with diversions in effect. A lane is closed on the M6 southbound exit slip at Junction 9, Walsall area, due to an incident. The M25 in Surrey faces clockwise disruptions between junctions 5 and 6 from a breakdown causing a lane closure. And on the trains, West Midlands Railway has reduced services between Leamington Spa and Nuneaton. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Nottingham Forest, that's my club. The striker, Taiwo Awoniyi, he is in an induced coma after having the first phase of surgery on a serious abdominal injury. Now, the Premier League striker underwent a procedure on Monday, having suffered a serious injury during Sunday's 2-2 draw with our East Midlands rival Leicester City, colliding with the post at top speed. It was an horrific injury and it's had serious consequences. I'm joined now by GB News reporter Jack Carson in my home city of Nottingham. Jack, the world of football is watching very, very serious news. Tell us the latest.
Well, there's been a lot of concern, hasn't there, over the past 24 hours when this news broke that Taiwo Awoniyi is in an induced coma following an emergency operation on Monday. We believe that this afternoon he still stays in that induced coma. The club clear to make sure and make clear that this condition of the player is not a life-threatening condition. The induced coma is there in order to restrict his movement, it's said, and also regulate his heart rate, and really for his own comfort, because we saw the pain that he was in on Sunday after suffering that injury when he collided with the post in that 2-2 draw with Leicester. We saw the pain of him struggling. The medical staff had initially assessed him on the pitch and deemed him fit to continue and stay on, but he had to come off the pitch minutes before the end of the game. Such was the severe pain that it seemed like he was going through. He was then assessed again by Nottingham Forest's medical staff on the Monday, when he was then admitted to hospital and underwent this emergency operation because of a ruptured intestine. Now, that is a serious medical condition. That is serious. It has a fatality rate of up to 30%, so it's a serious condition, but the emergency services, emergency surgery is said to have put him in a much better position and hopefully not clear when he will be released from hospital, but put him in a much better position to make a full and speedy recovery. Forest saying last night that the player was recovering well, but this is all also now accumulated in a debate around the laws of the game. When VAR was brought into the Premier League, the changes to offside and assistant referees and directive that assistant referees are given is that to keep the flag down for a delayed offside call when there is a question of onside or offside. That is an order then for the VAR, the assistant referee, to review the decision once a possible goal is scored. But when there is such a clear and obvious offside, as was the situation when Antti Elanga went through on goal, there is a situation now where there are a lot of clubs like Nottingham Forest and also around the Premier League and around the country wondering whether these rules need to be changed. I got a reaction from one of the fans of Nottingham Forest who was there at the game. Here's what he told me.
For a long time this has been an accident waiting to happen, I feel. It was clearly offside. Everyone in the whole stadium knew it was offside. Elanga basically stopped, but then sort of decided to carry on as he had to, really. And we all saw what happened. But yeah, I think the laws have to change, really. I was in the Peter Taylor stand, so we saw it all play out in front of us. And the physios took several minutes to evaluate him and clearly gave him multiple thumbs up, as he specifically held taking Elliot Anderson off the pitch to wait for them to give the all clear. Now, I don't know whether it's their fault or whether Taiwo was, insisting he could continue. But either way, they probably should have taken it out of his hands with with hindsight. But even at the time, I think they should have delayed the substitution for a minute. That would have made sense, and then made a decision.
You can hear the concern there from that fan and many others who watch the game. A lot of concern over this injury, but of course he is still in an induced coma. But Forest say he is recovering well.
Jack Carlson, I'm a Forest fan. No, few people wanted him to score more than I did, but he was clearly offside. The linesperson should have flagged earlier. Play would have been stopped. The rules really need looking at. There's been way too much of it this season, in my opinion, and it's had serious consequences here. That goal could have got Forest into Europe. He obviously would try to run through a football post to score it, but he was offside. He should have been flagged, and in my opinion, this injury could have been avoided. Thank you very much, Jack Carlson. Join us there from Nottingham. Thank you very much. And moving swiftly onwards, it's time now for if you're in search of some holiday sun this year, then here's the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Some heavy downpours and gusty winds over the central Mediterranean thanks to a storm system over the next few days, particularly wet and windy on Thursday across Sicily. With that heavy rain and those gusty winds will spread more widely across Italy and up towards parts of Croatia later this week. Some heavy showers too for Sardinia, northern parts of Spain. Generally dry, but on the cool and sunny side in Portugal. Sunny skies for Barcelona into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
And his wife, Nicola Peltz, who did not turn up. So there's been a lot of controversy around Brooklyn at the moment because he didn't turn up for his father's 50th birthday.
Yes.
So I don't think it would have looked right for him to attend last night.
But what's going on with them?
Well, rumour has it that, you know, there is this new girlfriend that Romeo's going out with called Kim Turnbull, who Brooklyn went out with many years ago. So I think that's been a bit of a sore point for the family, the usually united Beckham family.
But that's weird.
Yeah,
going out with your brother's girlfriend.
Yeah, it was many moons ago, but I'm sorry, there's so many women who would be interested in the, you know, Beckham brothers, so I don't know why he would have to go out with his brother's ex. So it's a sore point, and they've kind of just separated themselves from the family.
Oh,
so it's
it
not
is
just
a shame,
Harry and
isn't
Meghan,
it?
yeah.
Stephanie, good to see you as always. Thank you for coming in and seeing us. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Britain's newsroom at 9:30. Andrew and Bev are going to tell us what's there. Good morning, guys.
Morning. I'm interested in that Beckham story as well. I have to say, there's obviously been such an awful split with the eldest, with Brooklyn.
So it's sad.
It's really sad.
It's sad because Beckhams usually have this united front as a family, and it just seems like women are getting the blame for tearing apart brothers again.
But you see, Brooklyn Beckham, for me, never really found out who he was. He was the classic Netflix baby.
He's a bit lost, isn't he?
And you feel like his parents did everything. They paid for him to have a TV show cooking. They paid for him to do his photography. They just had to probably just push him out the nest.
But you know
and say,
what I find
yourself.
with men like that? They are easily swayed by their wives.
Oh, controversial. But I think you're probably right.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:49 and this glorious afternoon with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, carrying a 26-kilogram post box and rocking his trademark flip-flops, Stu Skinner is climbing the highest point of all of the 15 UK national parks to fight loneliness. His mission? To deliver real connection, one postcard at a time. It's a magnificent story. Postcards from the Peak is an open invite to climb, to connect, and to remind people why they truly matter. Well, he's joining me now, the founder of Head Outside Awards and Postcards from the Peak, Stu Skinner. Stu, my first question is, what on earth inspired you to think about picking up a cast iron postbox and doing this almighty walk?
I would like to think it was a well-thought idea, but I went to a charity auction. A post box came up. Nobody put a bid on it. I'd had a few drinks, was quite emotional, and then woke up with this post box the next morning. Started to regret my life choices, but I guess I've had a history of kind of transforming things into changing people's lives and raising awareness of mental health issues. And at the time, I guess I was experiencing chronic loneliness, which 7% of the UK population are also experiencing. And I just thought, a post box is a symbol of connection. And I just thought, why not take on a physical challenge, carry a post box up and see if I could get people to join me on these hikes and hopefully bring some more joy and connection to my life. And in doing so, bring hopefully some more joy and connection to other people's lives.
Now, Stu, on a fun point, I guess a lot of people after a few drinks have woken up with much worse than a post box. I digress. You then decided to put it on your back. But on a serious point, Stu, you talk about battling loneliness before, and I know you've kind of had your struggles, and you decided to do something about it because chronic loneliness, it shortens lives, it ruins life. It's a serious social epidemic. I know you care deeply about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think people quite realise the full extent and the impact that loneliness has. It's the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It can take up to 26 years off your life expectancy. It can perpetuate pre-existing conditions like depression, which make people feel lonely anyway. And I think there's still a lot of stigma. I think we're doing lots better when it comes to conversation about mental health. But I think with loneliness, there's a lot of stigma. That term loner in itself is an insult. And I just think people are suffering in silence. And I guess with this mission and campaign, I'm really encouraging people to speak their truth, to reach out and connect and find meaningful connections around them.
And Stu, we can see a map on the screen there of your route. Tell us, when do you start and how do people get involved? Because what you're saying here, Stu, is you want people, a bit like Forrest Gump, you want people to come along and kind of walk with you and join your journey and talk as you go along and share stories. It's a magnificent idea. When does it start? Where is it? How do people get involved?
Thanks for that, Martin. You're not the first person to compare me to Forrest Gump. So it starts on Snowdon, Ewidfa on the 31st of May, and then finishes on Ben McDewey in the Cairngorms on the 6th of September. So most weekends from the end of May till the beginning of September, I'll be taking on these hikes. You can just visit postcardsfrompeaks.com. You can sign up to one of the walks. We've really mixed up the routes so it's accessible. We've got someone on a wheelchair coming on one of the walks. We've got children as young as 5. But if you can't join one of the walks, then there is an online form. So you can send a postcard to someone you think could do with a message of hope, who might be experiencing loneliness. And perhaps if you're feeling a little bit lonely and could do with a message of hope, then you can request and I'll send you a postcard from one of the peaks.
Now, Stu, I've got to say, you're equipping yourself with a pair of flip-flops and a backpack. 26 kilograms is a lot of weight to carry anyway, but it's a big square obelisk on your back. It could chafe.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's done a lot of work in Osprey packs, have really helped me out. So it's a bit of a hybrid pack. We've combined some different packs together. The flip-flops, I've got a chronic Achilles injury, so I don't really have much choice. I've got to hike with flip-flops. I don't have any other choice. But I guess living with a condition like bipolar disorder, it's all about overcoming and adapting and still being able to do the things that I love to do. And, physical conditions or mental health conditions shouldn't be a barrier to do what we love.
Well, I'll tell you what, mate, I wish you the very, very best of luck. When I saw the story a couple of days ago, I just thought I had to get you on the show. I wish you the very, very best of luck. I wish people watching the show would join in. Tell us quickly, we've got 5 seconds. Where do they go to get involved? What's your website again?
It's www.postcardsfrompeaks.com.
There you go, get stuck in. Join Stu Skinner on this inspiring walk. The Forrest Gump of walkers with the post box on his back. Magnificent stuff. I really, really wish you the very, very best. Thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. Now, plenty more coming up in the next hour, including the Labour Party panicking about a reform wipeout. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now it's your weather with Alex.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The dry and sunny weather will continue, and for most of us, that goes through the weekend as well. Quite cool on North Sea coast, and it will be quite cloudy here as well at times. This area of high pressure is bringing the fine weather, but it's sitting to the north, which means the winds will be coming in from the North Sea, introducing more cloud here as we go through the night, and responsible for that cool feel as well. The North Sea is pretty chilly at the moment. Elsewhere, though, it stays dry and fine. We've seen some heavy showers in the southwest through the afternoon. They will tend to drift away. So for most, it's a dry night, long clear spells in the west, and it will be a colder night, certainly across central and western Scotland. Rural spots likely to dip down to freezing. So a chilly start, yes, but plenty of sunshine in the west. A grey start over central and eastern England, but that cloud should be breaking up and disappearing as we go through the day. But certainly to begin with, the southeast, East Anglia looking pretty glum. A spectacular start with spring sunshine for Wales, Northern Ireland, and indeed most of Scotland. Notice this breeze is still coming down from the north, though, so that will peg the temperatures back. Anywhere exposed to the North Sea and that breeze coming in from the sea, temperatures are going to struggle because the sea is so chilly. It will continue to feed in some low cloud as well, that breeze along some coasts. The cloud inland should melt away, but it may take a while actually. It may not be until the afternoon before the sun finally pops out, but for most places it is another blue sky day, and feeling pleasant in that sunshine. Temperatures maybe not as high as today, but still above average for most, high teens, low 20s across southern and western parts, but chilly on those North Sea coasts, where any mist and low cloud could just drift back inland pretty quickly during Thursday evening. That'll continue to be a feature of the weather through the weekend, so some eastern areas will be a bit cloudy, particularly in the mornings, but lots of sunshine to come, and temperatures mostly above average away from that east coast.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. A broken down vehicle is causing restrictions on the A92 southbound near Bankhead roundabout, affecting lanes 1 and 2. The M48 eastbound is closed between Junction 2 Newhouse and Junction 1 Ost for maintenance, with diversions set. In Walsall, on the M6 southbound exit slip at Junction 9, a collision has closed one lane, causing 30-minute delays. And on the trains, Cross Country and Grand Central services are experiencing delays between York and Darlington, and further delays towards Sunderland. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
You could be the next big winner on the road in this brand new Alnag Baron 560 motorhome, courtesy of Marquis Leisure. Imagine the fun you could have in this luxurious home from home worth over £67,000. We'll also give you £5,000 in tax-free cash to make your next getaway a great one. And it could be all yours. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
A very good afternoon to you on this magnificent afternoon. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, the Labour Party is set to spend hundreds of millions of pounds in seats where they fear electoral wipeouts from Nigel Farage's Reform Party in working class parts of Britain. Now, with the money set to be spent on playgrounds and ASBO officers, will it have any impact whatsoever? And are the Labour Party running scared of reform? I was joined earlier on by Lee Anderson, and in this hour, I'll be joined by a Labour activist for their take. And a stark warning from the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood about the UK's prison population crisis, where she announced a shake-up, including limits on how long offenders can be returned to prison and £4.7 billion worth of prison building, but no mention of deporting foreign prisoners. Will any of this ease the prison crisis? And the BBC's Gary Lineker has apologised after sharing a video on social media by a pro-Palestine group that depicted a well-known anti-Semitic rat slur. Just how many chances is Gary Lineker going to get? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, the show is a pleasure to have your company. £4.7 billion has magically been found today, although they took £1.5 billion from British pensioners to fix Britain's broken prison system. But here's the kicker. It will take until 2031 before we see the capacity of 14,000 increase. And in the meantime, there'll be early release. Up to only a third of people's sentences will be served. There'll be new digital prisons, which apparently means you'll be monitored outside, despite the fact that they can't seem to keep ankle tags as an effective deterrent, sitting at home watching Netflix. Does that sound to you like a deterrent? And I've got to say, not a single question from the assembled British media to Shabana Mahmood about the elephant in the room. 10,000 foreign nationals currently sat at His Majesty's pleasure on full taxpayers' expense, including almost 1,300 Albanians. We've got a returns deal with Albania. Why are any of those people in British prisons that you pay for when perhaps they should be sent home? That's 10,000 prison spaces right there at a sweep of a pen. That wasn't talked about. That wasn't addressed. Is that good enough? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do it. But now's your headlines with Mark White.
Good evening. At 3 minutes past 5, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. A prison officer has been attacked and had their throat slashed at a prison in Buckinghamshire. The incident was one of 2 attacks on officers at Wood Hill Prison in just 24 hours. In the other incident, a prison officer was allegedly assaulted by a terrorist prisoner. GB News has been told of a further 2 attacks on officers at Gartree Prison and HMP Hewell. Well, the attacks come as the Justice Secretary has set out plans to address prison overcrowding, branding the previous government's management of the prison system as shameful. Shabana Mahmood confirmed £4.7 billion of investment would be used to build 3 new prisons and fund new cells at existing prisons. But she said that further changes were needed to this system for recalling offenders back to jail for bad behaviour. The government plans to introduce more limited and fixed recall periods for those serving sentences of less than 3 years. Her proposals come as the latest weekly prison population in England and Wales hits 88,087, 99% of capacity.
It is shameful that this country in 2025 finds itself in this cycle of crisis. The last Conservative government failed to reckon with the reality of a rising prison population. When Labour was last in government, we increased prison capacity by 28,000 places. In their 14 years in power, the Conservatives added just 500 additional places, leaving our prisons on the brink of collapse.
Gary Lineker has apologised unreservedly for an offensive social media post which featured a picture of a rat, saying he would never knowingly share anything anti-Semitic. The 63-year-old TV presenter came under criticism after he shared, then deleted a post on his Instagram account from the group Palestine Lobby titled Zionism Explained in 2 Minutes. A statement later said that on Instagram I reposted material which I have since learned contained offensive references. I very much regret these references. The US president has now arrived in Qatar just hours after an historic but highly controversial meeting with Syria's new leader. That meeting with Ahmed al-Shara took place this morning in Saudi Arabia and comes just a day after the US decision to lift sanctions on Damascus. Al-Shara, a former al-Qaeda commander, led rebels in overthrowing the regime of Bashar al-Assad in December. He remains a designated terrorist in the US. Well, in Doha, Mr. Trump is having a series of meetings where military cooperation and regional security are expected to top the agenda in a part of the Gulf where the US has its largest military base in the region.
We are currently exploring normalizing relations with Syria's new government, as you know, beginning with my meeting with President Ahmed al-Shara and Secretary Rubio's meeting with the Syrian foreign minister. I am also ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria to give them a fresh start. It gives them a chance for greatness. The sanctions were really crippling, very powerful. And I spoke to Mohammed, and I spoke to our friend from Turkey, who we just spoke to also by phone now. But felt very strongly that this would give them a chance. It's not going to be easy anyway, so it gives them a good, strong chance.
The Prime Minister has claimed the Conservative Party is sliding into oblivion and is a dead party walking. So Keir Starmer was responding to Tory leader Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's questions as the pair clashed over Labour's employment rights bill and trade deals. Ms Badenoch criticised the Prime Minister's recent deal with Donald Trump, branding it a tiny tariff deal with the US, which she said hindered the UK economy.
The former trade minister must be the only former trade minister who's against all trade deals which boost our economy. She says she's against the India deal, even though it's got the same provisions she put on the table. She's against the US deal, even though it saves thousands of jobs in car manufacturing. And Mr. Speaker, most absurdly, she says she's going to rip up the EU deal when she hasn't even seen what's on the page.
I'm very happy to welcome his tiny tariff deal, but the fact is, it has put us in a worse position than we were in March. He should not over-egg the pudding.
And finally, a dramatic police chase with a difference. A Russian man led police in Florida on a marine chase for over an hour after stealing a luxury yacht worth around $2 million. He was eventually arrested when deputies used their boats to push his onto the bank before boarding it. Maybe he should have headed to the English Channel. He'd have been guaranteed free passage. That's all from us for the moment. Now it's back to Martin Daubney.
Oh, Mark, why you simply excel every single time. Thank you very much for that. Now back to some serious political news, because a stark warning today from the Justice Secretary about the UK prisons population crisis, where she announced a shake-up, including limits on how long offenders can be returned to prison. But will this really ease the crisis? Well, let's now hear from the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick.
The Justice Secretary is failing to protect the public. To govern is to choose. And today she's chosen to release early criminals who've reoffended or breached their licences. There were other choices she could have made. She could have brought forward emergency measures to tackle the 10,000 foreign criminals who are in our prisons, and we would have supported her. She could have brought forward emergency measures to get our court sitting 7 days a week and tackle the 17,000 people who are in our prisons awaiting a trial, and we would have supported her. Frankly, we would support her tomorrow if she did that. But instead, she chose to reduce the sentences of criminals who have reoffended or breached their licences. That's putting the public at risk. We know already the consequences because we've been here before. The last time she released prisoners early, someone was killed the very same day.
She says it's your fault the prisons are in this mess, though. The Tories extended sentences and just didn't build the needed prison places for those extra prisoners.
Look, I'll always be honest about the failings of the last Conservative government. Did we build enough prisons? No. Has any recent government built enough prison places? No. But the choices that the Justice Secretary made today are not choices that we could support. When we were faced with difficult choices, like she did today, we chose to do absolutely everything other than release criminals early. We focus on getting foreign criminals out of our prisons and out of our country. She's focused on releasing criminals early who have reoffended or have breached their licence conditions. If she brought forward measures to get foreign criminals out of our prisons or to get our court sitting 7 days a week, we would back her tomorrow. If she brought them before Parliament, we would be here sitting tomorrow to support her. We know the situation is difficult, but she's making bad choices, and these are choices that are going to put the public in danger.
OK, on the Reform Attack ad, what's your response to that ad that shows your leader, Kemi Badenoch, thanking the government for bringing more visas, letting more workers into the country?
Look, Kemi Badenoch has been very clear about the mistakes made by the last Conservative government, as have I. The result of increasing immigration was a disaster for this country. But our party is now under new leadership, and we are already taking the tough choices to ensure that we have a stronger and more robust immigration policy than we've ever had in the past. What we can all agree on is that Keir Starmer does not believe a word of what he said in Number 10 this week. It was like a hostage situation where he was reading out a speech given to him by his advisors. This is a man who has built his whole career on open borders. He opposed every piece of legislation to toughen our borders. He campaigned to get dangerous criminals taken off flights when they were being removed to their home countries. Keir Starmer can't be believed. He's not serious on this issue.
Whether or not
That was Robert Jenrick there reacting to the prison situation and also having a pop about immigration for good measure. Let's get back to that topic of the prison crisis and speak with GB News reporter Adam Cherry, who was in that briefing on the state of our prison. I'm also joined in the studio by GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. First to you, Adam. You were there. The situation was laid out. It's stark. Yeah. The system is at breaking point. It's on its knees. Talk us through the proposals, the solutions, and I think Mr. Jenrick there probably echoing a sentiment that I made earlier, and a lot of our viewers would have made. 10,000 foreign prisoners could be deported to free up capacity of 14,000, which is going to take £5 billion and take 6 years to do.
Yeah, so on that specifically, I was just looking, because jogging my memory, in March there was a press release that the government are pledging, I think, £5 million to encourage the faster deportation of foreign national offenders. So they have addressed this somewhat. It's part of their plan for change, but I suppose you would argue it doesn't go far enough. And clearly look at what we're facing here. So in November, if we continue on the current trajectory, according to the statistics laid out in that briefing today, we completely run out of space for adult males in prisons, and eventually law and order collapses because the officers can't make arrests, courts can't sit, so on and so on. It's a disaster.
Before Christmas. So before Christmas,
before the end of the year,
we're facing chaos, and even by Shabana Mahmood's own reckoning, we won't see any tangible difference if this plan goes full steam ahead by next spring. So we won't see any difference for a year.
Yeah. And of course, this is all ahead of the sentencing review commissioned and being written by David Gauke, who's a former Conservative Justice Secretary. The odd thing about that is, and within that we're expecting to see recommendations to reduce a significant number of sentences. The other thing about that is the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, placing a lot of truck with that, giving that a lot of credence. But in the same briefing, she said that this is a failure of previous Justice Secretaries and previous governments. David Gauke is a previous Conservative Justice Secretary. So why is he responsible for this sentencing review, which is so essential to your solving this problem? I couldn't quite make sense of that. And I would like to have asked that question if we were given the opportunity in that briefing. But nonetheless, so £4.7 billion to get 3 new prisons built, but of course that's not going to happen overnight. And so the long and short of it is people who should be in prison and would be under normal circumstances will be released early.
We have this concept of using more technology, digital prisons, that means the ability to be able to monitor people when they're at home. Now, there was one decent question asked in that briefing, and that was saying, well, that means somebody is basically, monitored via their smartphone while they're sat at home watching Netflix. Probably seems like a clampdown.
But also, what happens if they run away and violate those conditions anyway? They can't be thrown back in jail. There's not enough space. So what's the deterrent there? It's a real problem. And seeing that data be laid out was just extraordinary. I mean, absolutely extraordinary.
OK, Nigel Nelson, let's bring you in. I mean, it seemed to me like an admission of failure. An admission of failure, the system is broken. Obviously, again, blaming the Conservatives, 14-year broken promises, and that's meant a broken system. But did you see anything today that makes you feel that the British public will be safer?
Well, I mean, not that they'll be safer, because obviously we can't actually keep prisoners behind bars. That is the issue we're facing. So what in fact Shabana Mahmood is doing is looking for the least worst option given those circumstances. As Adam just said, we're talking about prisons overflowing by November and the whole justice system completely breaking down. I mean, I think that some of these things the public have to actually take responsibility for too. People demand longer sentences constantly. They demand more sentences, more punishments for more crimes. It's the public's fault we've got so many violent criminals. No, I didn't say that. What I said was that there's a whole host of things, for instance, that even in Tony Blair's day, 3,000 new laws were brought in. And every time you go and do that and you make them an imprisonable offence, you actually increase the capacity, you increase the number of people in a prison.
Like putting people in prison for Facebook posts, for example, or for being far right.
You could argue that, yes. You could argue that people shouldn't go to prison for something like that. Prison primarily...
But they all go for things like that.
I appreciate that. Primarily, prisons should be for people to keep the public safe from violent criminals and sex offenders. That should be the primary purpose of prisons. So, if there's an answer, what you do is you stop sending people for minor crimes to prison for less than 6 months. If you did that, you'd free up 32,000 places instantly and you'd solve your problem.
Well, and you'd also solve this problem by deporting 10,000 foreign nationals. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We need to move on to our next story because the Labour government is set to spend hundreds of millions of pounds on communities in reform voting regions. And the funding will be used to regenerate some of the UK's poorest areas, several of which were won by Nigel Farage's party in the recent local elections. And Sir Keir Starmer's MPs warn that the party faces, quote, electoral wipeouts without more investment. Well, we can now speak with the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. Peter, welcome to the show. So this is levelling up Mark II. It's throwing hundreds of millions of pounds at the red wall and hoping something sticks. It didn't work for Boris. The seats went back to the Labour Party. Do you think it's going to work a miracle for Keir Starmer and keep Farage from taking his seats?
I don't think Keir Starmer deals in miracles, and he'd probably be the first to say that. And I certainly think Labour shouldn't repeat Tory slogans, you know, levelling up. Barely got going under Boris Johnson, and then he was forced out because of his own scandals and incompetence. But it's a truism. All governments invest in the poorest parts of the country. The Blair government did that quite heavily. It's completely right that Labour, you know, are investing in poorer towns. If a Labour government exists for one thing, it's to support poorer communities to get to a more prosperous state. So I think it's the right thing to do. But, you know, Keir Starmer wasn't born yesterday. He'll see there's a bit of a political dividend potentially there as well.
Well, let's be honest, it's an attempt to buy votes. Politics generally is. But in this circumstance, it's about spending on small community projects such as playgrounds and ASBO officers. Seriously, Peter, do you reckon that people in the disaffected parts of the United Kingdom have been left behind, it has to be said, by successive governments, the post-industrial parts of Britain, the coal belts where I'm from, are they really going to be pacified by a new playground?
It's not about being pacified, but it's about treating people like adults. So I don't, for a moment, accept this idea that it's trying to gerrymander or buy votes. A Labour government has to exist to support poor communities. And look, I've been a parent of a toddler in Tower Hamlets, one of the poorest parts of the UK, just like Merseyside and parts of Glasgow. A playground is actually really important. If you're living in the inner city, it might sound like a small gesture to some, but a playground in the inner city or a community centre or a GP that can stay open for a couple of extra hours in the evening when one of the parents has got home from work. These might sound like small things, but they're really important when you're a young family or you're living in a poor area.
Peter, I've also lived in Tower Hamlets, and it perfectly exemplifies the thing we were talking about yesterday, an island of strangers, parts of the United Kingdom which don't feel like the United Kingdom to the white working classes. I lived there, mate. You can shake your head all you like. That's the precise point I'm saying. Border control, the changing social fabric of Britain is far more important than a playground or an ASBO officer. This doesn't do that, and I put it to you, it's a pea shooter against a tank.
Well, I don't accept that at all. And, you know, I appreciate that every Tower Hamlets and every borough in the United Kingdom is different and not every street's the same. But I felt actually after years of ferment and turmoil, occasionally whipped up by the likes of people like George Galloway, Tower Hamlets is a peaceable and happy place. It doesn't mean it's without problems. There are many social challenges there, but actually cohesion was pretty decent, and I had many Muslim friends, the vast majority of whom were born in the UK, but many Muslim friends in the Labour Party. Tower Hamlets...
Increasingly aren't voting for the Labour Party anyway.
Sorry?
They're increasingly not voting for the Labour Party anyway, people like that.
I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, I think Labour's vote across the UK is fractured. Sorry, I didn't hear.
Tower Hamlets doesn't vote Labour anymore. Many towns around the country will be replicating that. Back to the point of...
Well, it returns Labour MPs to the House of Parliament.
The changing social fabric of the United Kingdom, that's my point. Spending a few quid on small amenities in areas is important, but is it's enough to stem this tide?
But Martin, I just don't accept that at all. So first of all, Tower Hamlets and many parts of East London are returning Labour MPs again and again and again. They're doing a good job. And secondly, people on this channel have repeatedly criticised the grand projet, the large projects like HS2, where you're chucking 30 or 40 billion pounds at one project. To someone like me who believes in devolution, supporting poor communities, it's much more important to have the smaller projects. And yes, they're not the grand projet, and they don't come with big ticker tapes and a Hollywood ending, but a playground, a doctor's surgery, a cottage hospital, a school playing field, these are the things that matter to communities around the UK, so they're totally the right thing to do.
They absolutely do, but you could argue they should be provided anyway. There shouldn't be needed to be extra funding, and particularly, there's no coincidence, Peter Edwards, 85% of these areas earmarked for extra money, or seats looking likely to fall to Reform. It looks like they're trying to shore up imminent losses of electoral wipeout. Their quotes, not mine.
You're barking up the wrong tree. First of all, Reform only have one effective politician, that's Nigel Farage, and he's going to retire. Secondly, they have no economic policy, and the independent IFS said their Treasury plans
You've seen the polls today, Peter?
A work of fiction. Thirdly,
You've seen the polling today, mate?
Sorry, I can't hear you when you're talking across
Have you seen the polling today that puts the Labour Party and the Tories in free fall and the Tories in ascendance? Have you seen that?
Yeah, but Martin, there's polls like that every week, but we're not having a general election today. We're not having a general election next week. So, right,
all right.
Reform only has one effective politician.
We're not having a general election this week.
Ed Miliband regularly had a 10-point opinion poll lead when he was leader.
He'll lose his seat according to today's poll to Reform. Funny that.
But does it matter? That's my point. Ed Miliband had a 10-point poll lead and didn't become Prime Minister. So we can get hung up on poll when there isn't a general election. But where's that going to get you?
Well, we can write that on an Ed stone. Peter Edwards, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much. See, we parted friends. Now, coming up, there's fresh calls once again for Gary Lineker to be sacked after sharing a now deleted video on social media by a pro-Palestine group that depicted a well-known anti-Semitic, racist rat slur. Just how many chances is Lineker going to get? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain, we like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christys Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christys Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. Time is 5:27 with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, the BBC are facing fresh calls once again to sack presenter Gary Lineker after he reposted a now deleted social media post by a pro-Palestine group. that included a well-known anti-Semitic racist rat slur. And the Match of the Day presenter has, however, now apologised. But this has not stopped condemnation from Jewish groups and charities asking for the broadcaster to part ways with the fella. And we can now speak with the former BBC journalist, Danny Caddy. Danny, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Lineker's apologised. Perhaps he simply had to this time. The big question is it time for him to get the chop?
I think these are it's a hollow apology. I think they're crocodile tears. Martin, listen, I remember reading an article where Lineker said he was, when he was posting stuff on social media, he wrote it and then he didn't post it. He then reflected on what he wrote. He would never post anything after he had a glass of wine. He is so careful with what he writes. So I don't buy for 1 second that he wasn't aware of the significance of that rat that we see on our screens. Bearing in mind, only about 16 months ago, he was criticising Suella Braverman for using 1930s Nazi rhetoric about people coming over on dinghies, and here he is now using 1930s Nazi rhetoric. I don't buy it for 1 second, Martin. Now, the BBC are in a position now, he's only got a matter of games or Match of the Day left. The BBC didn't renew his contract. A year ago, I was telling you, Martin, that hell would freeze over before the BBC renewed his contract, and I was proven right. I think he wants to fall on his sword. I think he's pushing the BBC to actually sack him, Martin. I think that this activism has gone to his head. He realises that he's no longer a BBC employee. I don't think he likes rejection. I really don't. The BBC have rejected him and he's struggling with it. And I don't know. I'm torn because I think he wants to be fired. And I don't want him to succeed in this because I don't buy for 1 second he was not aware of what he was reposting.
Why do you think that would be a beneficial thing to happen to Lineker? Why would Gary Lineker want to be fired?
Because he's an activist and he's put his political views before his position at the BBC. So he can say, look, I've fallen on my sword. You know, people need to remember that he hasn't had his contract renewed. He gave an interview to the Times or the Daily Telegraph a couple of weeks ago. He said, look, you know, basically I've been sacked, something that I knew was going to happen. So I think he's backed himself into a corner where he's only got a few more Match of the Day specials to go. And he might as well say, look, I was actually sacked by this organisation with my political views. I don't know what goes on in his head, Martin. He's hardwired very differently to me and you and the vast majority of people watching this broadcast this afternoon. I just can't second guess the lad. But I think that I think the BBC should fire him, yes. I mean, just flip it round. If when I was at the BBC, not that I'm on social media, if I'd have posted something like, and conflated Islam, maybe with a pig's head or something, my feet wouldn't have touched the ground. What's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, if you did, you're absolutely right. If anybody from the so-called far right posted anything of equity about somebody from the left or somebody, as you say, from an ethnic minority, they would be out the revolving door at BBC House faster than their loafers could touch the floor. And you know full well they will be done, dead man walking out of the window. And Lineker seems to have more lives than a cat.
I don't get it, Martin. And I've been saying this for years. He's deeply unpopular at the BBC because he's actually causing the corporation, the future of the corporation, incredible damage because the BBC is reliant on future generations of licence fee payers. And people who earn, say, 25, 30, 35 grand a year at the cold face of the BBC, they're worried about paying their mortgage off. And every time Gary Lineker opens his big mouth online, they're thinking that's another nail in the coffin of the licence fee. Now, Lineker's on £1.3 million, and yes, he offered to take less, a significant pay cut, if the BBC were to renew his contract, but that would have still been a hell of a lot of dough, and money unimaginable to the average person at the BBC. So I think the BBC will probably have no choice but to sack him. I think overwhelmingly a lot of people would support that.
OK, Danny Kelly, we have to leave it there. Always a pleasure to have you on GB News. Mind, there you go. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, in a statement to GB News, Gary Lineker said this: on Instagram, I reposted material which I've since learned contained offensive references. I very much regret these references. I would never knowingly share anything anti-Semitic. It goes against everything I believe in. Plenty more to come throughout the rest of the show. But now, if you're travelling home from work or from school, first, stay safe. And secondly, here is your traffic and travel update. And please stick with us.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. On the A92 southbound, expect delays near Bankhead roundabout due to a broken down vehicle affecting lanes 1 and 2. The M48 eastbound is closed from Junction 2 Newhouse to Junction 1 Ost for maintenance, with diversions. In Hertfordshire, a collision on the M25 clockwise between junctions 24 and 25 closes one lane. In Bristol, a serious collision on the M5 southbound at junction 18 blocks 2 lanes, causing 30-minute delays. And on the trains, cross-country and Grand Central services face delays between York and Darlington, extending to Sunderland. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Travel safely home, and now let's get your latest news headlines with Mark White.
Good evening at 5:33. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. A prison officer has been attacked and had their throat slashed at a prison in Buckinghamshire. The incident was one of 2 attacks on officers at Wood Hill Prison in just 24 hours. GB News has been told of 2 other assaults on officers at HMP Gartree and HMP Hewell. The Ministry of Justice said, "We will do whatever is necessary to keep our staff safe." The Lord Chancellor has announced a review into protective body armour and a trial of tasers in jails to better respond to serious incidents, and will update shortly. Well, the attacks come as the Justice Secretary set out plans to address prison overcrowding, branding the previous government's management of the prison system as shameful. Shabana Mahmood confirmed £4.7 billion of investment would be used to build 3 new prisons and fund new cells at existing prisons. But she said further changes were needed to the system for recalling offenders back to jail for bad behaviour. The government plans to introduce more limited and fixed recall periods for those serving sentences of less than 3 years. Her proposals come as the latest weekly prison population in England and Wales hits 88,087, 99% of capacity.
It is shameful that this country in 2025 finds itself in this cycle of crisis. The last Conservative government failed to reckon with the reality of a rising prison population. When Labour was last in government, we increased prison capacity by 28,000 places. In their 14 years in power, the Conservatives added just 500 additional places, leaving our prisons on the brink of collapse.
Well, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, said the government was failing the public.
Justice Secretary is failing to protect the public. To govern is to choose. And today she's chosen to release early criminals who've reoffended or breached their licences. There were other choices she could have made. She could have brought forward emergency measures to tackle the 10,000 foreign criminals who are in our prisons, and we would have supported her. She could have brought forward emergency measures to get our courts sitting 7 days a week. But the choices that the Justice Secretary made today are not choices that we could support.
Gary Lineker has apologised unreservedly for an offensive social media post which featured a picture of a rat, saying he would never knowingly share anything anti-Semitic. The 64-year-old TV presenter came under criticism after he shared, then deleted a post on his Instagram account from the group Palestine Lobby titled "Zionism Explained in 2 Minutes." In a statement, he said, "On Instagram, I reposted material which I have since learned contained offensive references. I very much regret these references." You're right up to date with your latest headlines. More Martin Daubney even after the break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The dry and sunny weather will continue, and for most of us, that goes through the weekend as well. Quite cool on North Sea coast, and it will be quite cloudy here as well at times. This area of high pressure is bringing the fine weather, but it's sitting to the north, which means the winds will be coming in from the North Sea, introducing more cloud here as we go through the night, and responsible for that cool feel as well. The North Sea is pretty chilly at the moment. Elsewhere, though, it stays dry and fine. We've seen some heavy showers in the southwest through the afternoon. They will tend to drift away. So for most, it's a dry night, long clear spells in the west, and it will be a colder night, certainly across central and western Scotland, where all spots likely to dip down to freezing. So a chilly start, yes, but plenty of sunshine in the west. A grey start over central and eastern England, but that cloud should be breaking up and disappearing as we go through the day. But certainly to begin with, the southeast, East Anglia looking pretty glum. A spectacular start with spring sunshine for Wales, Northern Ireland, and indeed most of Scotland. Notice this breeze is still coming down from the north, though, so that will peg the temperatures back. Anywhere exposed to the North Sea and that breeze coming in from the sea, temperatures are going to struggle because the sea is so chilly. It will continue to feed in some low cloud as well, that breeze along some coasts. The cloud inland should melt away, but it may take a while actually. It may not be until the afternoon before the sun finally pops out, but for most places it is another blue sky day and feeling pleasant in that sunshine. Temperatures maybe not as high as today, but still above average for most, high teens, low 20s across southern and western parts, but chilly on those North Sea coasts, where any mist and low cloud could just drift back inland pretty quickly during Thursday evening. That'll continue to be a feature of the weather through the weekend, so some eastern areas will be a bit cloudy, particularly in the mornings, but lots of sunshine to come and temperatures mostly above average away from that east coast.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Well, good back. Your time is 20 to 6 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, at GB News, we'd love to hear what you think, and every day we run our poll of the day. And today we asked you, do you trust the government to protect Britain's fishing industry in talks with the European Union? And check this out. The results are in, and 99% of you say no, you don't trust the government, and 1% say yes, you do. There we have it. A beautiful balanced poll there at GB News. And for all of your latest poll news and how to vote, then you go to gbnews.com/poll. Now back to today's political story and a stark warning from the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood about the UK's prison population crisis, where she announced a shake-up, including limits on how long offenders can be returned to prison. But will this really ease the crisis? Well, let's now speak with a great friend of the show and a huge knowledge and expert. That's the retired prison governor, Vanessa Frake. Vanessa, we speak about this so many times, it feels like Groundhog Day. Here we are again. Today we've been promised
Here we are, Martin.
the thick end of £5 billion to build 3 new NICs. The bad news is that's going to take until 2031 for 14,000 places. Did you hear anything today that's convincing you, Vanessa, that Britain will be safer and the prison crisis can be averted?
Do you want my honest truth, Martin?
Yes.
The answer is no. You know, I think, you know, this is pie in the sky. It's like, yeah, great, build 3 new places. You know, we've got 170 odd prisons at the moment that are falling down. You know, the government has put in 500 million. It's more likely $1 billion that they need to maintain the current prisons that we've got. You know, HMS Milk Silk has just opened with 1,500 places. That'll take a while to get up to full capacity. But, you know, I mean, look, much as I disagree with many things that Shabina Mahmood says, I do agree with the fact that we cannot allow our prisons to get in a state of 100% capacity, because the effect on our society will be a loss of law and order, where police can't arrest people, courts can't sit, and that would be the detriment of our society as we know it. So, you know, I think the government was naive in that they thought what they did in September, October last year of releasing 1,400 would see us through to 2026. I and many others, I hasten to add, said that if they didn't do something better than that, it would be more like July. And at the moment, we've just got over 1,000 places left. You know, the prisons are filling up at 3,000 extra prisoners per month. Many are on recall. Many are foreign nationals. I agree with Robert Jenrick. Much as it pains me to say, they could have focused on getting rid of the foreign nationals that are languishing in our prisons and costing our taxpayers money.
Vanessa, you took the words right out of my mouth. 14,000 prison places is going to cost British taxpayers the thick end of £5 billion. And yet, as you rightly say, 10,000 foreign inmates currently at His Majesty's pleasure, taking up crucial capacity, almost the capacity in question here, at taxpayers' expense, including thick end of 1,300 Albanians. We've got a returns deal with Albania. Why is a single one of these people in a British nick?
It's called the ECHR, and solicitors, lawyers who make money out of keeping these prisoners in this country, delaying tactics, not helping them to move back to their countries, but rather than keeping them here for whatever reason, be it chicken nuggets or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm laughing, and no doubt we'll have this conversation again. Vanessa Frey,
sure.
It's Groundhog Day once again, but thank you as ever for your expertise. Fantastic guests. You mind how you go. Thank you. Now, if you're in search of some holiday sun this year, then here is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Some heavy downpours and gusty winds over the central Mediterranean thanks to a storm system over the next few days, particularly wet and windy on Thursday across Sicily with that heavy rain, and those gusty winds will spread more widely across Italy and up towards parts of Croatia later this week. Some heavy showers too for Sardinia, northern parts of Spain. Generally dry, but on the cool and sunny side in Portugal. Sunny skies for Barcelona into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or GBNews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Recently, Meghan Markle did a cookery show.
She did.
What happened? Because you made a certain comment and she...
I was asked by a national newspaper to basically review the show, what I thought from a chef's perspective. So I did, and really the opinions came across quite strong.
What kind of things did you say? Can you say?
Well, I didn't think it was a great show, to be honest with you. I felt that it was a bit forced and fake and stuff, which I've been on this show on GB News and explained that before. But I think the problems with Meghan was that Netflix are looking for things to do with her. You know, she's not going to be racing cars, and she's not going to be doing this, and she's not going to be doing that. So I think they've kind of thrown her into the whole kind of cookery thing. Make a nice show about it and, try and recoup some money.
And in it, there was a potential that you may have said that she didn't appear to be a great chef, or she might not be able to cook, or...
Well, my understanding...
Recount what you can say, and then we don't want you to get in trouble.
No, I think that, again, I go back to what I just said then. I think they've kind of thrown her into something. They thought to themselves what they're going to do with Meghan next. And basically they've kind of thought, well, most people can cook. Let's create a cookery show. Let's make her the new Martha Stewart. Let's try and recoup some money. Let's do, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to bring out pans and knives and tea towels, as well as what she's already launched already. And, yeah, I think it's... From a chef's perspective, it's very disappointing that streaming sites are, you know, backing people who have got really no experience in the industry and don't really have the right to be teaching people how to cook.
Well, she did make a really nice sort of like fruit rainbow, where she put all the fruit in the thing, in one and the other. And...
That must have been episode 1, because I stopped after episode 1.
Way, do you?
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 10 to 6 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, there were scenes of jubilation across Syria as Donald Trump announced that he would lift economic sanctions on the country. And the president said now was the time for the country to move forward with a chance at greatness. And it all comes, of course, as he continues his tour of the Middle East, firstly in Saudi Arabia and today heading to Qatar. And let's now speak with the former British Army commander, Colonel Richard Kemp. Colonel Kemp, welcome to the show. I wanted to get you on today because I'm fascinated about what this means for the war on Islamist terrorism in the Middle East, because yesterday Donald Trump was very, very outspoken. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, threatening punishing sanctions to try and cripple the Ayatollahs, arming his allies around Iran with billions of dollars worth to the teeth. Do you think this could be a significant breakthrough in stamping out Islamist terrorism?
Yeah, well, I think Trump has got two primary agendas in the Middle East at the moment, one of which is to increase stability there, which would include furthering relations between the United States, countries like, of course, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and indeed Syria, and extending, I think, the stability to Israel. When he was president in his first term, he basically founded the Abraham Accords, which brought normalization between a number of Middle Eastern countries and Israel. And I think he wants to extend that, particularly to Saudi. And part of the rationale behind that is also to marginalize Iran. What he's trying to do with Iran at the moment, he's made it absolutely clear that Iran will not get nuclear weapons. It's got a well-advanced nuclear program. What he's trying to do now is to come to some kind of negotiated deal with Iran whereby they will dismantle all of their nuclear capabilities under supervision, probably from the United States and other international actors. My view on that is that I'm not optimistic that Iran is going to agree to what is required, and there will eventually be the need to carry out military operations against Iran, presumably by Israel, backed by the US. And I think it's so important that Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons that if necessary, I think it would be right for a resort to military action.
So military action against the Ayatollahs to try and stamp out, they say the phrase, cutting off the head of the snake. Do you think that's necessary to try and stamp out the cancer of Islamist terrorism?
Well, Trump's, as I said before, Trump's plan is to increase pressure, financial, economic pressure on Iran by reverting to the strangling sanctions that he put in place in his last term, and that's already begun, and then try and negotiate. But if that doesn't work, then the head of the snake, as you call it, does need to be chopped off, because actually it's more like an octopus with its arms, its limbs stretching around the Middle East. It's not just the nuclear program that threatens the world, in the Middle East in particular. It's also the proxy groups like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like Syria, until it was knocked down by the current regime there, and various other entities, the Houthis, of course, in Yemen, in the Middle East. Iran is behind all of this, and Iran has to be dealt with one way or the other. Now, I think... Sorry.
Thank you. We have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time. Thanks for joining us. Former British Army Commander Colonel Richard Kemp, thanks for your company. Nigel Nelson, quick reaction from you there. Do you think Donald Trump could get a Nobel Peace Prize out of this?
Well, it depends if he goes to war, which is quite likely. I mean, Israel has wanted American support to take out Iran. If ever you go to Israel and you talk to government officials there, there's always the impending feeling of catastrophe, and that is Iran will get a nuclear weapon and then bomb Israel.
OK, well, that looks like it's a step nearer to not happening. Nigel Nelson, you've been great today. Thank you very, very much. Don't go anywhere, though, because 6 p.m. Up next is Jubes & Co., the queen of primetime debate. Jubes, what's on your menu?
Hello, Martin. Lots that we need to discuss tonight. I've got Aaron Bastani and Baroness Jacqueline Foster alongside me. We'll get stuck into it all. Some are suggesting the Labour Party is heading for an internal civil war because of Starmer's approach to immigration. What do you think to that? Also, relocating civil servants away from London. Is that going to achieve much? Of course, want to look at the state of prisons. And Ed Davey has asked Keir Starmer to pick up the phone to Trump and ask him to do more on Palestine. Your thoughts on that? I'll see you in a sec.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The dry and sunny weather will continue, and for most of us, that goes through the weekend as well. Quite cool on North Sea coast, and it will be quite cloudy here as well at times. This area of high pressure is bringing the fine weather, but it's sitting to the north, which means the winds will be coming in from the North Sea, introducing more cloud here as we go through the night, and responsible for that cool feel as well. The North Sea is pretty chilly at the moment. Elsewhere, though, it stays dry and fine. We've seen some heavy showers in the southwest through the afternoon. They will tend to drift away. So for most, it's a dry night, long clear spells in the west, and it will be a colder night, certainly across central and western Scotland. Rural spots likely to dip down to freezing. So a chilly start, yes, but plenty of sunshine in the west. A grey start over central and eastern England, but that cloud should be breaking up and disappearing as we go through the day. But certainly to begin with, the southeast, East Anglia looking pretty glum. A spectacular start with spring sunshine for Wales, Northern Ireland, and indeed most of Scotland. Notice this breeze is still coming down from the north, though, so that will peg the temperatures back. Anywhere exposed to the North Sea and that breeze coming in from the sea, temperatures are going to struggle because the sea is so chilly. It will continue to feed in some low cloud as well, that breeze along some coasts. The cloud inland should melt away, but it may take a while, actually. It may not be until the afternoon before the sun finally pops out. But for most places, it is another blue sky day and feeling pleasant in that sunshine. Temperatures maybe not as high as today, but still above average for most, high teens, low 20s across southern and western parts. But chilly on those North Sea coasts, where any mist and low cloud could just drift back inland pretty quickly during Thursday evening. That'll continue to be a feature of the weather through the weekend, so some eastern areas will be a bit cloudy, particularly in the mornings, but lots of sunshine to come and temperatures mostly above average away from that east coast.